Hey everybody, Tom here, and let me get the light a little better. That's kind of crappy. I can do better than that, right? And I am looking mad and plaid as I always do. Good evening here. I don't have this right yet, but I'll figure it out. It's fine. Get more comfy. I don't know why it looks right. Wrong. I'm too close. Let me try this 1 second here. Move this back a little bit. Adjust it. So bad with cameras. It's ridiculous. Oh, I know why I'm wrong. It's using the wrong camera. It's using the camera on the damn computer. That's weird. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Well, whatever. We'll use the computer camera. Okay, I don't usually do this, but I have the other one checked in there, and it's not using the right setting, but I don't want to screw it up, and we'll just have to make do. So, anyways, hello, everybody. I'm sitting here adjusting the camera behind me like an idiot, right? This just goes to show you don't want me being in charge of your technology. Anyways, good evening. Welcome to Coronavirus Central. We're enjoying the Friday evening show. Want to thank all of you for being here. Glad you are here. And you can hear me. Yeah, what's too high? Yeah, it's because it's probably grabbing it from the wrong damn speaker. I don't know what I can do about that. I'll try to talk a little more quietly. But anyway, glad you are here. Glad everyone is listening. So try to go forward with that. And welcome to the show. I hope some of you had a chance to listen to the podcast today. I really worked hard on this one. And what we had an episode that really covered China in a lot of detail. I think it was a really good show that I put together. And one of the things that, it's not just as pretty, right? Yeah, I don't know why I had this problem. It's plugged in, and I probably needed to adjust the settings. But if I adjust it now, it'll screw up the whole stream, so we're not going to do that. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying the podcast. I'm glad it's good. Yeah, I really made the case that I thought China might have done this because I've had people do it, and as I was going through telling the story, it kind of became believable to me. So one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, because I don't get to talk about it on the podcast as much as my sort of ideas about what is actually happening here and where it's going to go. We could talk about the past. We could talk about Wuhan, the biological lab, all the sort of accusations of what happens. You all know, if you've listened to this, I do think it's a biological weapon of some sort that was released, whether they were studying or whether it was some sort of plot. I don't know. I can't answer that. There's so many bad actors in this. I mean, who's the good guy in this story, right? I mean, the only people I really feel good about are the doctors and the nurses who are out there fighting this. But every government's behaved kind of crappy with respect to their own people and with respect to one another. So it's really difficult for me to kind of tell the story of who's good and who's bad. So I won't try to do that. But what I have noticed, and this is one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight, is this question about which countries are lining up with what. There was a story I was reading just a little while ago where Trudeau was going nuts up in Canada because Trump told the 3M plant in South Dakota not to ship any masks to Canada, and Canada doesn't produce their own masks. So you're starting to see countries that are allies with each other really having fraying relations. I read about another one. There was a shipment of masks on its way to Spain that got intercepted by Turkey and was grabbed by them. And it's funny to see a free-for-all between different countries that are supposed to be allies and supposed to be friendly, and you can see that's starting to fall apart, and you can see that states are starting to stand against one another. I went up earlier today, and I was actually looking at this being up here in Maine, north of Massachusetts, and I'm wondering, on one side, if you're in northern New England, you got New York over here, which has a bazillion cases, Massachusetts, which is getting higher, and Quebec, which has more cases than anything in Canada, and us up here in Maine are looking over at New Brunswick and at the lobsters on the shore and saying, why are we going to let all these people in here? And it's just one of those funny things. And I asked some of my friends up here what they thought about it, and they went to be like, yeah, we need to keep these things out. And that's the challenge, right? We've reached the point where we are now seeing some of the collaboration strategies give way to competition, and that's why I covered China today. I knew if I didn't have a chance to do it, I wouldn't do it later. And so I wanted to let you guys know all the different reasons why they think differently strategically. And the biggest thing they do is, in the West, we have a lot of different ideas. We have separation of church and state, separation of the economy from the government, separation of individuals and groups. It doesn't really work that way in China. In China, everything kind of serves the party. And obviously, there are individuals and they have ideas and there's good people and bad people. But ultimately, you end up having a situation where everything is kind of run through one central thing. So when the media says something, the party approves of it. Or when the military does something, the party approves of it. And so you have to understand all the things that are being done by China, from them strafing Taiwan with bombers, just threatening, looking tough, to handing out free masks in Italy. What they're really trying to do is create a public relations situation. And a big part of this story is that if you look at it from the Chinese perspective, China was in kind of a bad spot coming into this. India was militarizing, difficult relationship with Russia, Taiwan ever more independent, Hong Kong in revolt. Then you have this virus happens. It starts wiping them out, theoretically, at least in Wuhan. But it spreads all around the world, and now the whole thing gets reversed, right? China has all the meds, and people need those. And right now, there are two resources in the world that really matter. And there's pretty much only two resources beyond doctors. Number one is meds, and number two is food. The U.S. has the food, China has the medicine, India has a little bit, but they rely on Chinese ingredients. And you're seeing countries begin to work together in different ways. You're seeing Europe sort of fray at the edges, the EU not working as well, and China's just jumping in there, loving that, and NATO is kind of tearing itself apart in a bunch of little ways. So what I was telling you on the show is that the old world died with COVID, and we're in a new world, because honestly, what good is a dollar when oil is cheap anyway, and you can find ways around it? It doesn't really mean what it used to mean. And, in terms of using the military, you guys have seen, if you've been on Twitter today, the thing about Captain Crozier, if I remember the guy's name right, the captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and the fact that they are shutting down some of the ships here. That carrier had to dock in Guam. There's also a bunch of sick people on the USS Ronald Reagan. So you have a really weird, interesting situation happening all throughout China and the Pacific. And what does that mean? Well, it means there are different opportunities out there. So we'll see what happens. Now, in the middle of this, of course, we have a giant disease going on, a pandemic causing all these problems. But when people are unstable, they do things like they go shop for groceries with an AK. In the same sort of way, countries do the same sort of thing. And let's look. The numbers are terrible. I haven't even had a chance to look today until recently. So we're at 1,094,596 confirmed cases. Death rates at 58,774. That's a gain up to 5.4%. And just looking, let's see how bad the United States is right now. I haven't even had a chance to look. I'm sort of terrified to look, but I will look because it's my job to tell you these things, is it not? So let's see what we see. The U.S. gained another 30,000 cases today. We're up to 7,057 deaths on 273,472 cases, 11,201 recoveries out there, and that's a 2.6% total death rate. And if you compared that to the recovery rate, let's see, 2.6 divided by, let's do it real fast here. We'll do the math here, and I'll give you a precise number because we're good like that on Coronavirus Central Unscripted. And I'm actually looking forward to you guys' questions tonight. I'm looking forward to some more challenging, provocative questions, so don't let me down. I'll be disappointed. Really hoping you guys kind of put me through the paces here, just because there's a lot of things really interesting to talk about. The world is changing, and I don't know all the answers, but I'd love an excuse to speculate, and hopefully you guys will give me the excuse to do so. 18,258. Divided by 18,258. So the on-the-fly death rate is 38.65%. That's pretty terrible, right? That's for the United States. Italy's up again, 119,827. We're at 14,681 deaths. Spain, 119,199, 11,198 deaths. Germany, 91,159. They're up to 1,275 deaths. Their numbers starting to come up a little bit. They're a little slow, but they'll get there. France, 64,659. That's 6,507 deaths. That's a gain of 1,120. I know there were a lot of nursing homes they were starting to take a look at. And that's something we've seen throughout the U.S. We saw that in Louisiana. We saw that early in Washington. A lot of stories coming out of Houston about people getting sick in nursing homes, how that's happening. Pretty bad news. UK, 38,514 cases. They're up 4508. They're moving quick. They're up to 3,610 deaths. That's a gain of 685, but only 192 recoveries. Yeah, I guess that British cooking ain't working so well. Now Turkey's jumped up, and see, I knew they were going to come up. 20,921 cases and 425 deaths. So they're coming up. Other people, we might have some Canadians in here, 12,344 with 178 deaths. Countries between 10 and 20,000. Looks like Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, Canada, Austria, and South Korea. Brazil and Portugal should join them tomorrow. So that's what we're looking at in the news. Check what's going on here state by state. And if anything major has changed, I'm expecting New York, New Jersey, California. Let's see how I did. New York, New Jersey. New York's at 102,863, 2,935 deaths. New Jersey, 29,895, 646 deaths. Michigan, 12,744 with 479 deaths. Keep an eye on Detroit. Detroit's really in big trouble, and they've got a lot of problems with their medical system. They don't have the level of support of some of these other places. California, 11,986. We've got 269 deaths, and that's actually for them pretty good considering. Although I was reading a story that it's getting into the homeless population in Los Angeles. Now, how they'll be able to track what those numbers mean, I don't know. But when people start rioting down there, if it gets real bad, you'll know that it really did become a big issue. Massachusetts crossed 10,000, 10,402, 192 deaths. Boston's just being pummeled. Louisiana, 10,297 with 370 deaths. A lot of problems down there in New Orleans specifically. Florida, who's going to be near the top before this is all done, mark my words, because DeSantis has not handled this well. 9,585 cases, 163 deaths. Illinois with a big jump, 8,904, 210 deaths. Chicago was doomed to be a problem. We all know that. Pennsylvania, 8,566, 102 deaths. Washington, 7,180 with 284 deaths. Georgia, 5,967, 198 deaths. Texas is jumping up the list slowly but surely, 5,330, 90 deaths. And Connecticut at 4914 with 131. That East Coast cluster is a mess, man. That whole thing, I've been looking at the map of this, and if you take from basically about Philadelphia all the way up to Boston, it's just nothing but problems. And you knew that was going to be an issue because there were a lot of people there, and that was always going to be a problem. So what does it mean? Well, the government is trying to get in front of it. The CDC now decided here on April 3rd that masks prevent you from having respiratory illnesses and that you should do it, although the president was out there saying it should still be voluntary. So they still don't know what they're doing. I know a whole bunch of people were trying to figure out if they could get unemployment, waiting with the other 7 million Americans to see if it could happen. We also saw the case where a lot of people can't get access to their checks. They're not going to go through for a long time. And so we're all just sitting around here kind of wondering what's going to happen. And the answer is we don't really know. I was watching a video with Dana over on Ice Age Farmer, and they were reporting about all these problems with the food supply that are starting. And it's interesting. It's that there are little problems along the way, like the people who produce the cattle or who should I say, have the butcher yards aren't taking the cattle in, or the egg carton companies being shut down so the eggs can't get to the market. There's all these little weird quirks that are not happening that are going to collectively cause a whole lot of trouble. And if you're in an area where you have people who could stand between you and that, we could see a lot of things happen. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the pictures of empty hospitals. One of the things that has happened is hospitals have shut down the ability to do anything else in there. And there's a lot of problems with that. People who are genuinely sick, who need help, are probably going to get sicker and die. But conversely, they're doing that because those people would get sick and die from the COVID patients anyway. You also have the staff wanting to be protected. I shared a video on Twitter, if you're not following us there, at CoronavirusCast. And so this woman who quit her job because her boss wouldn't let her wear a respirator in the ICU or wear an N95 mask of her own bringing, and she chose to get fired rather than to go ahead and suffer this because she didn't want to get her family sick. Not a very good job by the hospital there, and there's going to be a lot of this happening because the hospitals and the medical system are not treating people well. So, when you look at the response out there, I understand it's sort of panic, but when things happen this much against the logic of what should be done, you really have to start asking a lot of questions. And that's what I'm doing. I really don't know what to make of this anymore. I do know one thing. I don't have a lot of confidence in the American government response at the national level. I haven't felt very good about the team that they have together on this. I mean, there's some people who have some talent, but the ability of them to put it together, it just doesn't seem to be there. And I don't know why they can't be proactive about absolutely anything. And it seems like the way they've got this set up, you watch people kind of moving about, milling about a little bit, they're going ahead and they're getting to different places, and even the restrictions they put in place, they have essential items. I was reporting today that in Vermont and Maryland, they don't include seeds in that. Well, isn't food an essential item? You would think if they could figure this out. Banks are considered essential and food aren't. There's America in the year 2020. No, this is literally what we're dealing with here, and I can't make heads or tails of it. But you know what the good news is? We're here together. It's a Friday night. We're going to have a good time. I'm going to have a drink. And the more I talk, the more I'll probably drink because that's the nature of the Friday night show. But there are so many problems. And the thing that drives me nuts, and you guys have been with me for a while. Some of you have been with me a really long time. You're watching in slow motion the cultural dissolution of a great power. This is America destroying itself, and I don't know why we're doing this. You can make it all go away if you just shut it down for 40 days. I've been saying it over and over again, It's biblical, honestly. You could do it, but are we going to? Doesn't look like it. We will do everything except the right thing, except the thing that will actually work. So let's go to your questions. I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Give me questions. Make my life easy. don't make me have to tell you more stories, because honestly, this week's been a tough one. The show today took 3 hours to do and about 2 hours to put together. Hopefully you really enjoyed it, but I want to close with this bit on that. I remember seeing a post on 4chan, actually, I should say it this way. I saw a post on 4chan late January. It said, China just fired the first shot of World War III, and they won in a single blow. And, you really wonder that, because if you looked at America and you understood the fault lines and the divisions in this country, and you understood the West and the things we do well and the things we do poorly, this was the perfect attack to destroy a society. And that's what you're looking for when you're fighting. You're looking for things to tear things apart from the inside. It's clever. It's technical. And whether this was China taking advantage of an opportunity or something more sinister, at the end of the day, once this got into America, you knew there were going to be a ton of people who were going to say, I'm going to do whatever I want. And a ton of other people were saying, these are my rights, you won't do it. And you knew the government would try to take care of the people at the top and not the people as a whole, because honestly, the people as a whole don't really matter that much, except for when they go pretend to vote and accomplish something. And there were all these things you could really predict would be problems. And it was terrifying in the one sense, because I watched it in real time and I had a hunch what would happen. I always did. But every step of the way, I had two goals from the beginning of this, and I'll just tell you. Number one, to give people the tools to keep themselves safe. And number two, to demonstrate along the way all the options that weren't taken. Because I kind of knew it would come to this, and I didn't want it to. But basically, by the time we hit mid-February, I knew we were on a path that was going to go poorly. And here we are now watching this go sort of out of control. And look, they're saying, oh, the streams and the models, they don't know. But I will tell you, it looks like it's getting worse, right? I've been looking at what's happening in Brazil and Ecuador and Mexico. This thing's mutating all over the place. And some of the mutations make it more harmless. That's absolutely true. But some won't. And this is going to bounce around like a ping pong ball because we gave it space to run. It's like one of those things. It's like letting letting a dog who's rabid run in your house. And that's kind of what we did. And now we're going to deal with the consequences of that. And, for China, they got hit hard. They lost a lot of people, a lot more than they said. But ultimately, they contained it and they let it go. And Asia contained it by and large. And Western Europe specifically and, North America have not. And beneath that, you look at Africa, you look at Southeast Asia, South Asia potentially, the Middle East, Egypt, all these countries. Latin America, they are not going to contain it very well either. So what does this mean? It means a new world with two poles in it. The Chinese who run the medicine and the Americans who run the food. And you're going to see people jump sides and switch sides as they've been kind of poor allies. And you can ask questions about that. Personally, I think you're going to see the EU, which kind of like being authoritarian anyway, get buddy and buddy with the Chinese. Russia may or may not be part of that configuration. And in the new world, you'll see NATO begin to fall apart. You'll see the UK get closer to the US, and you'll see that you'll see Europe and China be part of the end of the Belt and Road effort. One of the interesting things in that, if you really start to study it closely and you're willing to go to this level of geekiness, is to look at the gold supply. The US theoretically has the world's largest gold supply. The countries that are second, third, and fourth respectively are China, Russia, and Germany. So if they get together, they have just as much. And what can you do at that point? Well, when oil is trading at under $10 a barrel, you can begin to take down the dollar. And when you have the American carrier fleet grounded because the captains are panicking and the people are sick, it becomes a possibility. You can look at something like a Taiwan, and you could look at proxy wars to drag us in. I mean, say Iran decided to invade Iraq. Would you support going in there? I wouldn't, but if you don't defend your allies, what happens? And now we are back to a chaotic, multipolar world where eventually we're going to have spheres of influence again. And for America, you sort of predict, if it holds together, which is a really big if, you're going to have that be the Americas, which, is inevitable, the whole Monroe Doctrine, probably Japan, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and perhaps India. That's kind of what it looks like. And then the rest of it's going to be kind of stuck in an awkward situation. You want to be between a rock and a hard place, be between the EU, I should say really Germany, because that's really the heart of that, between Germany, Russia, and China. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you study history like I did, you found that alliances were just every 20 to 30 years. For instance, France and Prussia fought wars, but then France and England were together, and now France and Germany are friends, and this happens over and over and over again. And look, the return of history isn't always the worst of things, but we're having this happen during a terrible pandemic. A lot of people are dying, and unfortunately, people are going to look for opportunities. Some people are going to come into this poor and leave it rich. Some people are going to enter this rich and leave it dead. And these are the things that happen in history. It's an interesting time. I hope you're ready to survive. if you went ahead and you prepared, if you listened to this program and used a little common sense, you will be in a position to have an advantage no matter what happens. And let's say, hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just going to be something that's going to burn through and it's not going to be a big problem. But, we've had 10 million people lose their jobs in a country out of 330 million people, and we haven't even hit some of the big states as heavy as we can get. Like, what happens when you have 30, 40, 50 million people unemployed? Well, in the Great Depression, they went out and they started farming and they took care of their own. But how many of you know how to farm? Hopefully a lot of you do. If you don't, you're going to start learning. Pro tip, go buy some seeds. You're going to need them. We are now going into a world where things are going to get simpler, which is good in one sense, but more complicated in another, because we've been specialists, and now you generally have to care about a lot of things. You have to look at nature very honestly, and you have to be ready for things you weren't ready for before. And I know a lot of my audience leans left of center, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. That means you're coming basically without breaks into the world of realism. So that's what I'm here to do, to help you, because that's the humanitarian thing. It's the Christian thing to do. And because honestly, I want people to make it. I try to help a lot of people up here in Maine, including people who hate my guts, make it, because that's what I want to do. The more of us who make it, the easier it is on all of us. And that's how you got to kind of think about it and be real honest about those people who are a problem. You can't give people the benefit of the doubt beyond the point which they don't show they deserve it. And that's where we're at this point. And unfortunately, in that matrix, I have to include a lot of the politicians. It's fine if they were just incompetent and inept, but the problem is we're going to suffer because of it. So that's my little entrance soliloquy. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Must have done okay. I kept 68 people. Holy heck. All right, let's see what we got here. So we're going to go through all the questions. I always do. Every single question I get to. Thank you for everyone who's here. Welcome to Coronavirus Central. Very glad to have you. The #1 show here on YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. It is the #1 show, though, for coronavirus coverage. It's the oldest show, most total downloads, and people listen to me. In fact, I get hit pieces written about me all the time. I'm banned in China. I'm banned on Spotify. I am banned everywhere respectable. Why? Because I tell you the truth. It's like the Mos Eisley Cantina, and Han did shoot first, in case you're wondering. So should you. All right, Seaver, glad to see you're here. Always welcome. Thank you for moderating tonight. Much appreciated, brother. Margot, good evening, everybody. Let's see. Throttle Grim asks, can you review these vids? First-person videos of Elmhurst, it's deserted. Are these legit? What's going on? A lot of people are walking through hospitals, and they're finding situations where there's a lot of empty space. You can do that in almost every hospital. The truth is, most hospitals have a secure area in an operating room and an ICU ward that exists to handle COVID-type patients. Everywhere else would be shut down. You would expect that. Absolutely, they're legit, and that is something you would absolutely expect to be happening. Sarah, good to see you. Happy Friday. Glad you are here. Michael, glad you're here. Mary, hope all is well in Indiana. Asian Cowboy, good to see you down in Augusta. I wonder if did they shut the golf courses there yet? Renee, it's Chandler. Hey, that's pretty cool. I grew up in Phoenix, actually. Barry Goldwater High School, represent, right? H2O. Let's see. Are viruses gay? Asking for a friend who is not me. I'm sure you are asking for someone who's not me. Well, let's see. They like to hook up a lot, right? I'm just kidding. Terrible joke. Viruses are funny. A better question is, are viruses alive? I spent a lot of time looking at that and wondering about it. These things have been floating around forever, and they go connect. Is this virus made? I don't know. But the virus is very infective, and it's evolving all the time. So let's see what it has. It's trying out new relationships. Maybe it's a little bit bi, right? Michael, I just ordered some vacuum cleaner bags to make my own masks after seeing a study that the material is much more effective than cloth. Still plenty available on Amazon. Glad to hear that you're moving forward with that, Michael. It's really a great thing there that you're doing, and I think it's a really important thing that people begin making their own masks. We have a woman here in our small town who's actually working on that and trying to help a lot of people. So very good news. Glad to hear it. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. I just did it the simple way because I was out in front of it, but I recommend to anyone who can't do it, you can find your own way. Let's see. Part 2, does stapling HIV to a cold virus make it more or less hetero? No, asking that for me. I want to, your friend needs to go, your friend needs Jesus. That's what it needs. We'll say it a nice way. Does stapling HIV to a cold virus make it more or less hetero? Well, it does certainly seem to be combined, and hetero actually means different if you put it together. So from the Latin roots, yes, it would. Is anyone sick of the media's petty questions at the presidential briefings? Of course, look, the media is awful. I got someone today floating around wanting to ask me stories. And it's like, do you want to talk about the virus? And the person's like, yeah, I'd love to talk about the virus, but I want to talk about your background too and all the projects you've done. I'm like, meh, meh. All right, here's the hit piece. Here's the reality for those who don't know. Yes, I am a political radical. Yes, I've talked about secessionism. Yes, I've said identity's a thing. And you know what? Identity's still a thing. We are now in a new zero-sum game. The zero-sum game is that we are now dealing with people who think the virus is real and who care about life, and the hoaxers who are going to get us all killed. So if you're on Team Virus, bye-bye. If you're on Team Humanity, I'm with you. It doesn't matter. If you're wrong about certain ideas, don't worry. I'll convince you in time. I'm good at that. Not really worried about it. But the problem is, and I will tell you this, the reason the media is so aggressive about this is they like the old world where they could ask questions based on fantasy, okay? And they were able to do this because people weren't afraid, and because people weren't afraid, they didn't ask questions. Be honest, how many of you in this chat went along with something you knew was a bunch of crap because you didn't want to have to deal with the hassle of fighting the question? I don't blame you for doing so. If I had done so, I'd still be town manager in Jackman, Maine. But ultimately, doing that gets you into a lot of trouble, and they were able to punish people because people would go along with it as a lynch mob. Now the lynch mob is calling out the people who are getting them killed for being unrealistic, and the media, unfortunately, has been a part of that. Making the American parties, the Democrats and Republicans, fight with each other doesn't help. If you want my opinion, Trump has not been good enough, Pelosi has not been good enough, Schumer has not been good enough, McConnell's not been good enough. You have 10 million people fighting to talk to the same four ladies at the unemployment office in the United States now, and you think that's a good solution? Why didn't you just write the checks? The same checks you're letting the banks write to everyone but the American people. These are the sort of decisions that could have been made. But I am sick of the petty questions, although to be honest, Trump needs to be better too. He hasn't been on his A game with a lot of these questions. We need a leadership that has a clear message that we're going to fight the virus, we're going to beat the virus, and we're going to do this. Okay, so thank you for those questions. And I'm good. Like I said, I'm going to answer everything. You might regret asking me, but I'm going to try my very best. Asian Cowboy, have you seen the video using a combination of copper sulfate and zinc sulfate to make the mask antiviral? I have not seen that video, but it does make sense biologically. Zinc, copper, and silver are all known as having strong antiviral properties because of the electrical charge they emit. It tends to denature viruses. Now, it's very well understood. There's a number of studies I've read about that. So the science of it being solid, the only question I would have is if it caused any weakness in the material of the mask. Assuming it did not, that would be a very good idea. So definitely think that's smart. McSparron, good to see you. Glad you're here. Good evening, all. So much change in the past month. Isn't it true, though? I mean, honestly, I don't know where we're going to be a month from now. I don't know where we're going to be a week from now. At this point, I'm just trying to make it to Good Friday and to Easter, and then we'll see what happens. I may have to take a couple days at that point for planting season off. You guys will probably laugh about that. Maybe I'll just do the evening show for a little bit so you can kind of hear what's happening, because you better be planning for things to be changing all the time. And one of the things you need to plan for right now is to be able to feed yourself. Not because problems are happening right this moment, but because we don't know what the future is going to hold. Preparedness is all about anticipating problems. It's better to be over-prepared and laugh about the thing you have and don't need than need a thing and not have it. So let's see. Mary says, I have a problem. I do not trust that people in my household are staying far enough away from others. I see items coming into the house from stores. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is changing the behavior. Well, what you need to do is put a protocol in place that you feel comfortable with. A lot of people are going to have a clean room where they drop things off depending on where and how they get them, and they can sit there for a day, 2 days, whatever the latest advice is. I know for cardboard goods, that is up to 24 hours. So you absolutely need to have that conversation. And I feel for you, Mary. A lot of people are that way. I mean, my wife would tell you I'm that way, and I'm still pretty careful, but she's much more meticulous than I am, and I don't mean that as an insult. She would be very careful, and she has to be. So you need to go ahead and impress upon them that the importance of this. And you know what? Even if you have to guilt them a little bit, maybe pretend you're sick for one day and, get people to act that way, maybe you need to scare them straight or show them terrible stories about people getting sick. I try to do that every now and then on the podcast just to give you guys a little bit of feel of the real consequences of this. And so many people are getting to meet and know someone who's really in danger of this. Really sad about that. Swim goggles from Michael. Glad to see that. Absolutely awesome. Is there a point to wearing anything other than an N95 mask? Because CDC is now saying to use non-surgical masks. And actually, an N95 mask is better than most surgical masks. I will say that. Anything better than an N95 is good. But yeah, I mean, look, anything that, even if you have to wear a bandana or a scarf, you're going to get some blockage, and you want to get as much as you can. There are values to having other masks out there, and an N95 may not be absolutely impenetrable. You may need an N99 if you really wanted that, or a full face respirator, because of how thinly these aerosolize. So, but there is value, because think of it this way: or how should I use an example? If you have a roof that has a hole in it, a drip in a hole is actually better than getting absolutely slaughtered by something. But you do want to have the best mask possible and the best coverage. Social distancing really is the best way to go, though. Avoid people, and more importantly than avoiding people, almost avoid talking directly in the direction of someone. One of the things that I really would recommend, that I've been thinking about but I don't see people doing, if you have to have a conversation with someone and you don't want to get them sick and they don't want to get you sick and you don't have masks, if you are standing, how should I say, if I was here and then the person was here and I'm talking this way and they're talking this way, then the voice, I look like I'm dog paddling, the voices will carry in these directions, as will the breath particles, and that way you're far less likely to get each other sick. So if you do just a little bit of thinking and a little bit of thought, you can kind of keep that a little bit better. But yeah, the CDC has been changing their mind all the time, Ted, and to be honest with you, use common sense about it. You know how this is spreading. It's spreading primarily through air, through particles, right? Where it's aerosolized droplets, whatever. Protect the holes that you're worried about, right? Including the deadly poop flume, which they've been talking about, and I warned you about it. That's starting to come up. Protect your eyes, protect your nose, protect your mouth, and be smart about things. In case people ask, yeah, I should get rid of the beard, but honestly, I really like it, and I don't go out very much. We've gotten to the point, actually, the pharmacy in town now brings the stuff right out to you, so I don't even have to go in anywhere. It's absolutely awesome. Okay. So let's see what else here. Sarah, my cousin in Washington is making 200, 300 masks a day for first responders, as she had to close down her bookstore. Way to go. Awesome for your cousin. And nurses are starting to protest at the University of California today, and so they should. But, when the nurses get sick, it doesn't help anyone. We should support them, and we should support the idea, and I understand if they don't have it. Let's just be honest about it. Figure out some way to help them and get them some protection. There's got to be something you could do. And for the nurses themselves, if they put together something in our area, I'd donate 20 masks to it. I can't donate all of them, but I would donate some. I would absolutely do that. And there are people in our town that would do that. I suspect countrywide, worldwide, that's the case. Moontree, glad you are here. Glad to enjoy the evening with you. Let's see. Sebastian, glad to see you. Hope all is well up there in Montreal tonight. Let's see. You guys are covering here. Long time no see. Alberto Labrada. Is that Italian or is that something Spanish? Greetings from Connecticut. I hope all is well down there in the Nutmeg State. I've heard you guys have got it pretty bad, so hopefully that'll be the case here. Asian Cowboy, let's see. I'm just going over what you're reading. J.N. Waters, good to hear from you down in Kentucky. Hope all is well down there in the Bluegrass. I've been hearing a lot of good things about Governor Beshear. Let's see. Did anyone else catch the president saying this was artificially made? I am aware of that, and I am not surprised at all. I mean, let's be honest. You guys tell me. I'll put a little survey up here, and you tell me. I'll scroll over it. I want you to tell me in whether you believe natural or artificial. Just write one-word answers, and you tell me what you actually believe is true. You can write an answer afterwards why you believe what you believe, but what do you believe? Do you believe that this virus just popped up and all of a sudden can adapt to all these different environments? It's just as deadly in Iceland as it is Brazil, and it manages to be asymptomatic and pop up? Did you guys remember the story I did the other day about the woman from Detroit who was having basically brain hemorrhaging from this? All of these problems that are out there, this very clever, very wicked virus that has this HIV spike protein that can go ahead and enter through ACE2 receptors, but then CD147s, and then others, and it infects in all these different ways. Even SARS-1, if you do the research on it, a lot of people who really studied that thought that it was, in fact, something that was artificially produced. And look, they say these things can't exist in nature. Look up something called XNA. They literally have biologists creating new forms of biology at this point in different institutions. So if you think they can't manage a simple virus, you haven't been paying attention to your virology. And I can only imagine how much goes into black budgets in different governments, including the People's Republic of China and the United States of America, towards utterly disgusting things. So do I think it was artificially made? Absolutely, I think that. And people always say, well, it has natural components. Yeah, it has natural components. And they welded them together in a really interesting, messed up way. And the question is, why did this happen? Was it released intentionally or whatnot? I can't prove any of these things, but let's use a little bit of common sense. How is that working? And the more time goes by, the more I begin to think that it did escape in China at some point. And whether it was released by the Chinese themselves whether it was accidentally released by the Chinese or whether it was released by a third party. I think one of those things happened. I think China knew a lot earlier it was happening, and I'll tell you my evidence. On January 3rd, they closed down the engineering school for the People's Liberation Army in Wuhan. Some 20 days, if I remember right, before what was happening, they actually closed down the town as a whole. So someone in China knew something was happening. And that's not the sort of thing you do if there's an accident. So whether they suspected someone had released it or they knew that it had been released, they were protecting their most important cadres while they let the low-level bureaucrats go out there and take the blame for the thing. So I think China knew it happened earlier, and to me that suggests that China either accidentally or intentionally let it go. And you ask, how could China let something go? Well, remember, China is a country with a whole lot of people. Some of you might remember that one-child policy where they have a whole bunch of men, not a bunch of women. And let's talk about China for just 1 second, right? China is a country that's losing Hong Kong, losing Taiwan, manufacturing starting to go overseas. The economy had been slowing for a long time, quite a bit of unrest under the surface, and they were sitting in a position where their whole effort to control the supply chains was already at threat because of changing and growing nationalism. So while they still had the monopoly over us, while they still had everyone in the kink of being the world's manufacturer for everything, including pharmaceuticals, now we have a situation where you can't plausibly blame China because who would be crazy enough to do this to themselves? Well, if you read Sun Tzu, you know the answer is the Chinese. And did they end up infecting the whole world? I don't know. Did they do it on purpose? I don't know. But I will say one thing, they've been damn smart about taking advantage of it, and now we're looking at it in April. China looks like the winner, and we look like the losers. And was that predictable? Of course it was, if you understand warfare as much more than just armies, but the way that you strategically undermine societies. And the West wasn't hard to undermine. Let's be honest. Half of us hate each other on a good day, and it hasn't been too good lately. But the beer's good. The company's good. Thank you for spending a Friday night with me. God bless all of you for being here. Let's continue forward. All right, let's see. Remember the size of particles. Cloth is like Swiss cheese. Yeah, there are problems. Let's see. Trump refusing to wear a mask just basically killed the CDC guidelines. You know, one of the stories that I suspect I'm going to be telling in about a month or two is stories of a whole bunch of people getting sick over the Deep South, because you don't really hear much about Mississippi or Alabama. I mean, Louisiana we've heard quite a bit about. And good to see you, Astor, by the way. Is that you've seen, there was this New York Times article Dana had sent to me. I'll have to try to find it later. Where it was showing where people were still moving about and where they were doing things. And overwhelmingly through the South, they were doing it. And they're not doing that amount of testing. So you're going to expect later they're going to deal with the consequences of that sort of action. It's like all the kids who went down to Mexico for spring break, or who went down to Texas, the South Padre. Now they're all getting sick with coronavirus. You know, stupidity meets obviousness, bad outcomes result. And this is one of the things we expect, and we've seen a very cavalier attitude projected in many ways by the president, and I think there's going to be real consequence to it. It's a very sad and sorry situation that, unfortunately, some people are taking that lead, and I think it's really, it's poor leadership, to be honest with you, and it's really dangerous for the people who are going to get sick. So that part makes me sad. Christy writes, hey, Tom, mailed you and Dana Carte. Thank you very much for that. God bless. Please say hi to my brother Kevin Clayton. I asked to join tonight lockdown in Riverside. At the intersection of 91 and I-10. I've been to Riverside before. I used to go visit out there when I was a kid. I hope all is well out there. And one of the things that was encouraging for the Californians out there was when Dr. Birx came on yesterday and actually said that you guys are keeping steady at 8%. So you're doing a good job flattening the curve. Hopefully that will continue to be the case out there, especially outside in the LA suburbs, because I think if things get bad in LA, it'll be interesting to see how you all cope. Let's see. It's disgusting to see how people are using politics to make decisions. Yeah, I agree with you, Asian. It's absolutely not helpful at all. And you know, the thing about it is the facts are the facts. The virus is a fact, you know. And look, I understand people on the right. Look, I come from the right. You all know that. I'm really a radical centrist. It's kind of like if left and right are here, I'm like out here somewhere in a different galaxy. But for the purposes of the conversation, I understand the concern that people on the right have about privacy and about the dereliction of civil liberties and government overreach. I think people on the left would share a lot of those concerns too. There's going to be a lot of people on the left that are going to be big gun advocates after this, for instance, for really obvious reasons, and we welcome you to the ranks. It's good for you. You'll understand a lot more about self-security after the end of this. But what I wanted to say with it was that you really need to begin to understand that these things transcend politics in a lot of ways, and that we need to figure out a way to do this where we both do this and that. For instance, the virus can be very real, and people can be using it for the wrong reasons. That has happened. That's already happening. And the fact is, you can't overlook the virus because the virus doesn't care. That's why biological warfare was banned. And despite the fact that we literally built nukes that could have blown up the Earth, to this point, people have mostly stuck away from doing it because it was unpredictable. Use the example of the of Cortez bringing smallpox to the Mayans, and I'm sure he wasn't necessarily thinking of it to that level, but realistically, that's what won the New World over from the existing civilizations. It was a virological warfare, and you see this happen over and over again, but it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen, and you can't control it. It's the reason you don't do it. And yes, people work on things like designer genetic plagues and racially based plagues and all sorts of awful stuff that make you lose sleep at night. But that ultimately you have to get past those sorts of things. We have to get past politics and at least have some human decency. And if we can't all get along together, fine. We can separate in ways that make sense. But we need to now be able to work together. And, I've tried to show leadership in this. Look, I'm a notorious figure, right? I'm the infamous Tom Kaczynski. But I'm out here telling you that that stuff doesn't matter now. We have to work together, and we have to put all of our intellect together and be successful. And that's what I do. And that's how we have to do it. And I'm going to tell you another thing. I mean, this is ugly, but this is the truth. We as people are going to have to do it because our politicians as leaders are not. Some governors are doing a good job. Some mayors, I don't want to lump everyone together, but there's a lot of people doing a really poor job, and a lot of them have jobs in Washington. Not surprising. And I was saying for a long time Washington was going to suck. That's why I'm up here in far New England. Literally, I could probably walk to Quebec, faster than I could drive to Massachusetts, and I'm not even joking. Okay, so Fauci's a good guy. Yeah, I don't have a problem with Dr. Fauci. I mean, look, I'm making broad statements because it makes for a more entertaining show. But yeah, you guys are laughing at the beer Corona Familiar, La Cerveza Más Fina. Problem, Corona USA is actually shutting down production. So these might be antiques soon enough. They are running out of opportunities to do that. So if you're going to go get them, last call for Coronas. Deprogram, glad to see you. Glad you're here every time. Let's see. In Kentucky, we are surrounded. Now they are coming in. Oh, I believe you, man. Believe me, I was talking to some of my Mainer friends, and we were like, yeah, there's a bridge connecting us to New Hampshire and Massachusetts. If New Hampshire doesn't take it out, we better. And I'm not advocating terrorism, unless someone misinterpret, but we don't want to have people coming up here sick because in rural areas, you don't have health care abilities. You just don't. Our hospital couldn't handle that, and I've seen the places, a lot of New Jersey places, oddly enough, in rural Maine. But people are getting out, and, hopefully they're healthy. They're here now. We'll have to deal with it. Okay. So let's see. Patches O'Houlihan. Hello from Atlanta. Stocked up on okra and grits. Man, I love me some fried okra. That sounds good by me. Dana's not a big fan, but I absolutely enjoy that. And I hope things are okay down there. It sounds like it's getting pretty bad in Georgia. You'll have to let me know what's going on here. And let's see. What else you all got here? Good to see you, Christy. KC. Hi, Tom. On behalf of Christy Coleman, if China continues to flex its military, and considering the Wuhan flu originated in the country, wouldn't the entire world go against that regime? Thank you. If it was ever proven that China caused this around the world, yes, the whole world would want to punish them, and they would want to put them in a hurt locker. But the problem is, if you do that to China being a nuclear power, they could cause a lot of problems on the other side. If you want to know why countries go out there and claim this is a natural disease, it's because the people who could have done this are people who could destroy everyone else. It's like you can't blame the bullies. And these are bullies. I mean, whether it's the U.S. or China, that would be true. But the entire the thing about it, though, it's funny. Politics people have short memories. That if China can offer help that countries desperately need at a time the U.S. is falling down and other countries can take advantage of that, look, countries are not very loyal to one another. They're just not, okay? So people may go ahead and switch, and that may end up happening. So would countries near China want U.S. as an ally? Yeah, of course. If you're like a Vietnam or Cambodia, you might. But if you're a bigger country a little further away, like Germany, and you're kind of annoyed with some of the things America has been doing anyways, maybe you go ahead and say, hey, let's have a conversation, or Turkey or Iran. And countries, Kissinger, I'm not a big Kissinger fan, but he had one great quote I always have used. Countries don't have permanent allies, they have permanent interests. China's interest is not being surrounded and getting that Belt and Road working. They're going to work on that all the time. And if they can make friends, they can bribe a lot of people in a way that America can't and frankly won't, or people wouldn't allow it, and people would not look at that. and not even considering hyperinflation. Yeah, Asian Cowboy's right. Hyperinflation's coming. And one of the things that guarantees it is the fact that you have all these countries on the outside of this thing having gold, and we're just spending like absolute crazy. I mean, I don't think dollars are going to be worth that much in the future. People ask me for what to invest in. Invest in things you can keep on you. All right, let's see what's happening here. Sarah writes, have been bunkered down since the Disneyland enclosure. This is absolutely crazy. They were reading. I was reading that 92% of people are like unemployed in Anaheim because of that. It's going to be bad, and anywhere that's dependent on tourism, you're really going to get hit hard. Suggestion: why don't you start getting into like something else? Orange County used to be big on growing, fruits. And what they should do, actually, in California, what they should do is convert. And I've been to Disneyland. They should convert that giant parking lot into a huge public garden. It would be really, really smart. A good chance to pull the community together. What is it? Let's see if I can remember. It's Euclid, Kachina, what is it? Horton or Norton, and then there's like Disneyland Drive. Did I remember? Harbor Boulevard. It's been a long, long time. I haven't been to Disneyland since 1991. But let's see how my memory works if I do it right. Okay, Becca. Good to see you, Becca. Hey, Tom. My husband requested to watch you this evening. He wanted to see what you were drinking. You did see, but in case you didn't see there, that's it. I had a bottle of Riesling as well, but I just didn't feel like going through all the hassle, and I was kind of feeling, I had chili for dinner tonight. I made a nice big pot. Dana's upstairs resting. Say a nice word prayer to her. The wife isn't feeling very well. Unfortunately, actually, let me insert this. She can't get some of her medicine already because she, having babesia, uses some of the same drugs that are out there, and this is something that's happening all over the place. Really sad. Something that's going to happen to a lot of people as we come into that sort of season. I won't get into her pharmacology that much, but it's absolutely been a big problem. But that's what I'm drinking. Absolutely here. It's good to see that. And I hope all is well out there in Southern California. It's kind of interesting talking Californians because I've been raging against California for the last few years, to be honest, since we're sharing some things. And it's interesting to see we can all come together again when there's a real problem. I'm actually kind of grateful for it. It's a good conversation because you guys are talking to the bum in the cabin here, going around looking like Uncle Buck. All right, plus a beard, right? All right, Justin. I've tried to share with other Trump supporters, but they absolutely refuse to listen to common sense. So let me tell you something I learned from being a good Christian, okay? Which is that your job is to give the testimony, but your job is not to necessarily to convert everyone. You say what you know to be true, you give people the information, and ultimately if they don't take it and run with it, there's nothing you can do, and it's really unfortunate. And this has really thrown things together. And we have a strange assembly of people who are aware that all share a healthy dose of paranoia and awareness of what's happening in the world. A lot of Trump supporters are not there. A number of Trump supporters are. A lot of Democrats are not there. A number are. And, now we're making new friends, new allies, and maybe some new people we'll have to keep an eye on. But really, you work with the people who have skills. People who are slow adopters are not people you have time for, other than those in your family you have to bring along. If you have the luxury of people you can't go without, you have to work with them. I get that. I understand that. But for the most part, you don't have time for people who can't catch up. And I said, what was it, about 2 weeks ago, we're two clans now. We're survivors and we're griefers. People who let the grief of the world that's fallen behind and the things they cared about consume them will not survive. So welcome to the new world. The good news is you can bring your drinks with you. You're allowed to do that. We will find a way to survive. And we have to figure out a way to make something good of this. Otherwise, it will be even worse. And there's opportunities, too. Remember, the virus is succeeding in killing a lot of people because it is destroying things that are unhealthy in our society. It's a tragedy, those who are lost. No one celebrates that. Nobody wants that. Least of all me. I have a sick wife. I get it. I have older relatives. I understand. But nonetheless, the upside of the virus is it is revealing a whole bunch of things for the truth of what they are. And as you see that truth, think and act in a way where you remove those things that you hate that have been so disgusting in this. And remember the people who committed perfidy upon you, me, and all of us, who did not care about us, who did not care about our health and these things. We have to do this or they will never learn. And you can't let people screw you. You just can't do it. It's the way of the world. And now we live in a world of consequences. We could turn the other cheek. But even that, biblically, there was this whole saying, oh, you're a Christian, you're supposed to turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek was an insult. People don't realize that. That's where you say, That's literally what it meant. It didn't mean let people beat on you. It meant that you were someone who had to hold others to account. And that's what we're all doing now. And for those people who don't want to listen, look, I had a Trump supporter, a friend of mine even, who was out there saying, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do what I want because my Constitution and my rights. And he was out there and he was acting like a complete moron. And this guy's smarter than this. He should know better. And he's risking getting everyone sick just so he can strut around like a prima donna. And you know what? I just didn't have a lot of tolerance for him. I went on Twitter for about, not Twitter, I went on Facebook for about 10 minutes and I lit this guy up like a firework. And people, he's still in hiding after I did what I did because when I yell, I'm mean. But it was just one of those things. You've got to find people who take this smart and who do the right thing. And that's it. And there's consequences. And don't be afraid to castigate someone for doing something that's wrong, but makes people defend it. Because sometimes you don't know what people are doing, but when people are just being idiots and being selfish, you absolutely can call them out on that, and I recommend it. I will join you. And if you need me to do a personalized telegram to someone to tell them, hey, wise up, I'm happy to do that for you. It'll be cathartic for me and effective for you because I'm the expert from afar. All right, let's see what all you guys got for me. Rob, good to see you. Hope all is well there in the Windy City. Another week of solid growth and the quality of the podcast and independent to do within my life each day. Wake up, brush teeth, and podcast. Man, podcast is tough. This week was a hard week for me. I hope you like what I did with it. I took it in some directions that were a little different. See, CNN isn't going to bring in doctors who are going to tell you the possibility of destabilization of the United States and balkanization. You're not going to get that on the corporate brand. But I really been trying to let you know how I see things shaking out. I was a medieval historian and a decent one at that. And this is that sort of situation where you have a high interdependent society struggling through a very difficult time. So hopefully you're getting something from it and that you're using the information in a way that's very helpful. I'm glad to see that I'm helping out with that. It's hard for me to imagine someone listening to me for 3 hours. Ask my wife how she does it, but she says I'm entertaining. So I believe her, of course, but obviously you guys must feel something and enjoy it. And it's weird for me. I got to say, it's like doing this thing. I stare into a camera. I literally stare into a camera or a microphone for probably at this point 15 to 20 hours a week. And I just talk at it. And yes, I know you're out there and this is easier because you're interacting with me, but it's really fascinating to me to see this actually work that way. And I actually kind of wish I had someone here. Every now and then when I used to do my old show, I'd have someone on the couch and we could have some interplay and some dialogue. But I can get a lot of information to you quickly, and it's been good and useful information, I think. And we continue to be ahead of the curve, and we will be because you can see certain problems. And it's not a matter, I don't always know how things are going to work out. I'm just really good at figuring out what won't work, and I think that helps. But it is amazing to see politicians on both sides circling their wagons. And, of course, hi to Dana. I'm good to see you're here and you're upstairs. Why does Trump refuse to endorse wearing a mask in public? This will only end with more deaths and longer period before the economy opens back up. Probably his ambivalence is caught up in the fact that the United States can't produce the number of masks it would need, and he doesn't want to have the criticism that will come for that. I think that's really the issue, although JN has a different idea. So let's see. Astor says 3,218 deaths in New York. Yeah, New York's got a lot of people dying. That's no joke, and a really sad situation on that. Good to see you, S70. Glad you are here. Let's see. California governor opening up 7,000 rooms in motel to be able to put in homeless who have COVID, he announced today. I'm glad to see Governor Newsom get in front of that. I thought that was going to be a problem, and we'll see if that works out. Let's see. Almost 6,000 deaths today. Absolutely crazy. How about all the homeless encampments in Indiana? Shaking my head. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, I don't know how. I know that you have all these populations. One of the things that's really not been addressed at all is the status of populations in indigency. And, look, it's kind of weird for me to be doing this as a right-wing guy in this thing, although at this point, whatever. You can't leave whole groups of people of large numbers unconsidered, whether they're migrants, whether they're homeless people, whatever their status is, whether they're waiters and waitresses who just need money for jobs. There are all these people that will float about, and they can be spreaders. Because I'll use the example. I forget who it was who was saying. Scroll up here for 1 second. Who was telling me about? I think it was Mary who was saying this. That a family who doesn't pay attention and doesn't take it seriously, one person in that family can get a whole bunch of people sick. And that absolutely is going to end up happening. I'm very worried about that big problem. So But it is a problem what they're going to do with it. I think it's good that you put people separated, but we'll see. I mean, once you put all those people in motels, I'm not sure they're going to want to leave. And that's one of the interesting things. I had a crazy idea, and I know some people might love it, some people might hate it, but I actually think why not? If we're going to go ahead and reset everything anyway, let's make it fair. Have a debt jubilee, erase everyone's things, everyone walks away with a house, all the survivors, because we're going to have enough people die in this thing, I'm afraid, where there will be that, and everyone can get a house. You get the house you have, or we'll have some sort of a lottery. We'll come up with something fair. We'll figure out a way to make some of the people who had resources somewhat whole, and everyone can walk out of it with a new beginning, not saddled by debts, and then start over maybe with a more decentralized industry where we have a big infrastructure act and build things at home. I think that's going to happen anyway. The only question is will be if it will be the United States of America that does it or the countries that follow alongside it. Because you can't just ask people. I mean, imagine this. Imagine we're locked down for 4 months. People don't have money. They've been unemployed, living on the fringe. They couldn't pay their rent. They go out. You have thousands of these people, and then all of a sudden everyone just gets dragged into court saying, pay your landlords or get evicted. That's one way to create a lynch mob. And let me tell you something. People don't generally like people who own property holding companies. That sort of thing happens. And in fact, that's actually, if you want to know the history of the French Revolution, that's sort of how it happened. The first and second estate, which were the nobles and the church, were squabbling with one another, and they brought in the third estate as mediators, and they thought of pox on both their houses, and then the heads started to roll, and the rest was history. These sort of things happen all the time, and if we do not consider the needs of our people, then something that considers them will come along. And is that better? Is that worse? That's up to the government to decide. They could fix this, and I think that there would be a lot of support for who does this, but people are playing politics like you guys are saying. It's absolutely a problem. It's really sad. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Steve Lauder writes, good to see you, Steve. Have you addressed the state of the military? The military's got a lot of people getting sick. It's overextended over in a lot of foreign countries, and I don't know how prepared it is to deal with different things that are ongoing. They are trying to keep it in a state of constant readiness because they anticipate, rightly, that the odds of a war are considerably high. I have read that Iran has been sending a number of militias helping into Iraq to destabilize things there, as well as in Yemen. I know that they're worried about Mexico potentially collapsing or cartel violence, including fentanyl coming in from China. And we looked at Mexico has, well over 100 million people, 130 million people, I think, and they have, I think, 360 ICU beds. Going to be a problem. And what's going to happen when that migration happens? A bunch of people coming up towards the border, and we're going to have to either secure that or do something. That's going to be a real problem, and the military may need to be used for that in a very real way. So is the military in trouble? There's over 1,000 cases of COVID reported within it, and that we now have shifting alliances and certain problems. A lot of troops are forward deployed. I would suggest it's a good time to bring troops home from places like Afghanistan and Iraq to places that are a little bit better secured. But we'll see what ends up happening. I do expect our troops are ready for whatever happens, but what I don't know is if it's very smart for America to get into any sort of wars right now. But a lot of other countries know that, and don't be surprised if you don't see something stupid happen yet again in the Middle East because we're still stuck in there. Remember, Afghanistan was called the graveyard of empires for a reason. It was their overspending, along with other things, that got the Soviet Union killed. Even though they were winning in Afghanistan, it cost them too much to win a war of attrition, and they ended up leaving with a bunch of problems that followed. The United States is in not much of a different position with the Middle East. These people have been fighting each other for thousands of years. They will continue to do so long after we leave, until one of them kills off the rest of them. It's just the nature of how most of the world works. I'm not endorsing it. It would be nice if the world got past it. But they've had a long time. These people who remember democracy back when the Athenians were trying it, they've seen these things. It just isn't them. Take my word for it. All right, Casey Parker. Stay in place minimum until June. Absolute minimum. World as we knew it done. New normal will be normal. Yeah, let's see what's happening. I mean, you guys tell me. What do you want for a new world? Ask questions or tell me the sort of things. Anyone know definitive time for our stimulus money? I hear it will be less than 20 weeks. I have no idea better than that. It's absolutely disgusting how they're doing this, and it's going to be a while, and that's not helping people. I mean, by the time they get it to you, there's not going to be anything for you to buy. It's crazy. All right, Becca, there's a rumor in my hospital that we're not supposed to bring to our own, but this is false. They're totally supportive of it, as is our national society. Glad to hear that your hospital is allowing masks. Absolutely smart. Tom, could New York City allow food truck shipments in and out and close borders to people traveling? Right, cheers. Yeah, why not, right? I mean, the legalisms of it. You're not supposed to be able to do this, but you could do it, and no one's going to stop you at this point. Can you imagine the judge that goes out and says you can't do this? New York absolutely could do that. It would be tricky. If New York got really bad, what I think they should do is they should take somewhere a train system and use that to get in there. I think that's the smart way to do it. But the problem you're going to have in New York is a little different. You're going to have truckers not want to come into the whole region. It's not so much a problem of unloading it, although that's a problem too, but it's getting the food supply and the shipments in and out, and whether people will want to put up with that. Because the problem you're running into is a lot of farmers and ranchers, can't get the goods produced. The distributors can't move them, and they're not sure they want to get rid of them. I know a lot of people who have farms, and they're keeping all their herd, they're keeping their cattle, they're keeping their chickens, because they're not sure. They'd rather have the food around than the money and what that means. And then remember this also, when you're looking at agriculture, big agriculture, your Tyson, Cargill, people like that, these companies by and large use migrant labor for 95% of what they do. Migrant labor isn't coming in here, and if they start getting COVID like we think in Mexico and coming up through in that chain, you're not going to want them here anyway. So what's that going to mean? Well, someone's going to have to go doing it. I mean, I don't know. Do you think kids in the Midwest are going to want to be knockers, taking out chicken and whatnot? I don't know. These are questions no one's really thinking about, and they're really important questions, and it's one of the reasons I recommend getting your own food as much as you can at this point. It's still out there. Figure out a way to get to what you can, because I can't answer those questions. But I can say this. Think of your environment. I'm in Maine. That means getting a fishing pole to go fishing, and if I have to go hunt a deer, I'll do it, and that's fine. That's meat. That's an opportunity, and figuring out ways. Plus, it'll help you, keep your act together, whatever's out there. So, it's something to think about. Good show this morning. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. Fear Blonde, glad to see you. Hope all's well out there in the Buckeye State. All right, Aster, 55 cases in my parish. Let's see. Becca says, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I predict we'll be in some form of lockdown for regional for the next year. If that's the case, I don't know how long it'll hold together, and I'm going to tell you why. People are already starting to go a little nuts. The medical supplies will be a problem. I think it's 12% of Americans take antidepressants, and we'll probably run out of those pretty quick too. So what's going to happen is, especially if you're not taking care of these poor people, they don't have jobs, they don't have support, they can't go home, they're under quarantine, they're going to go shopping however they have to at the supermarkets by grabbing stuff, and when violence starts, people aren't going to come in there. Or, if they go ahead, like in Sicily, they were putting, what were they doing? They were putting Carabinieri, their cops, their federal police in the supermarkets. You know what will happen? People will hijack trucks off the highway. And these things have happened historically. So what are you going to do to protect that along the way? That's why you got to make everyone whole, or you allow the virus to win. And that's what I've been saying from the beginning. You got to shut it down. You got to do things certain ways, because all these economic problems are cumulative, right? And it's economic in the sense that things don't move, and you end up with sugar in the gas tank, as I sometimes say. You're going to see all of these sort of issues out there. And I don't know. And look, maybe I'm too pessimistic. I mean, people have accused me of being a bit of a doomer, and I think that's true. Let me just adjust myself here. I'm known as a relentless fidget in real life. An hour in. Welcome. You're listening to Coronavirus Central Unscripted. Tom Kaczynski ongoing here, drinking my beer. So anyway, I never thought I'd be rocking the dad vibe, but the beard allowed me to do it. And, I'm just sitting here being the cranky old uncle in the cabin. But it's useful. You learn things, and there's a reason why I lived in the middle of nowhere. I saw some problems going. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, lockdowns are definitely going to be happening, and they're going to happen periodically in different places until this blows through, and what that means. And I think the one thing that enough people aren't estimating is there's going to be a lot of people who die from this, like we've seen in Italy, who die from other conditions that aren't getting treated because of this. Heart disease, cancer, whatever's out there. There's a lot of different things. It's going to be kind of sad, and people are going to get frustrated, especially if they feel like the government isn't getting out of it. And this sort of half-in, half-out approach where we have things go in and go out. I can see why some countries like Sweden were looking at going right to herd immunity, because this is going to be a lot harder this way. And really, the best way to stop it, I continue to say, and eventually what they're going to try out of desperation, is to shut down for 40 days. But if they wait too long, the choice might not be their own. And I don't know what that means. But I mean, look at the politicians out here. I mean, Trump's answers have not been good enough, and Joe Biden's been absent altogether. So I don't know, what you have faith in. I mean, what do we want out of this? We're Americans, right? I mean, do we want something different? Do we want to keep it together? What would make you feel confident? Tell me. Do you want the military to take over? That's a possibility. I mean, there are these things, and I know they sound sort of crazy at this point, but I think at this point, what people really just want is a steady hand and competence in someone who they think is going to work at this, and we haven't really seen that or felt that way, and that's a failure of leadership. I'm sorry, but it just is. I mean, even if it's true or not, you got to project it, and you're not projecting it well enough. I mean, look, I was a leader. I went up in my town. I gave speeches. You have to say, we're going to go fight this virus. We're going to win. We're going to shut it all down. It's going to come back together. We can do this. Democrats, Republicans, Speaker Pelosi, I need you. Leader Schumer, I need you. Leader McConnell, I need you. Leader McCarthy. All of these people, and you bring them up there on stage. You do the kumbaya speech, even if you hate their guts. And you go up there and you say, we're going to do this. We're going to shut it down. We want to protect American lives. We're going to ask you to make a sacrifice. Every house will have 7 days. We're going to send you a check. Go get the food you need. Get the meds you need. We'll fill them for 30 days. It's not a problem. 60 days if you need. Stay home unless you have desperate medical need. And you could have done this. I could have solved the problem in 2 minutes. But we didn't do it because we tried to be smart. Everyone gamed the virus. And you can't game a virus. It's the craziest thing. It's like playing a game of tug of war with a mechanical winch. How are you going to beat a machine? And a virus basically is kind of like a machine. It's a little bit of code you're fighting against. But that's what we saw. And the countries that took it seriously are winning. And the countries that still don't take it seriously aren't. It's like, well, it's not in my backyard. It doesn't affect me. And this is the real virus. You want to know what it is? It's we don't give a damn about each other. And so that's going to change. But I decided I want to give a damn about people. I want to live in a world like that. And to the extent I can have an influence, and I might be able to, Maine will be that sort of a place. Hopefully you make your community that way. Greenville, Maine has done a good job. And I give a lot of credit to our town manager and the people here. They've listened. They've been thoughtful. We will get through it. It might be a little tough for some people. Let's hope we don't get sick. And I hope that's the case for you. Whether you live in something ranging from New York City to, I don't know, what's the smallest town I can think of? Nowhere, Arizona, population 19. All right, question. I've been following COVID since January 3rd, not doubting it, but what is your take of all these people, the hospitals being empty, in case you tuned in late? My take is that there's a lot of the hospital is empty. 90% of the hospital isn't being used in most places right now. And I will say this. I'm usually a fan of James Keefe, whatever, Project Veritas. I think he does a lot of good work. I just think he missed it on what Viktor Orban's doing in Hungary. There's lots of people right of center who admit this is real. Only in a couple populous countries, most notably Mexico with Obrador, with Bolsonaro in Brazil, and to a lesser extent Trump in the U.S., are you seeing this problem. I think it's really sad. Volumes overall are down all over the place, except in places being slammed. And you would expect that because people are staying home. They don't want to get sick. And because people are staying home, they're probably not getting sick from other things. That's good. You want that to happen. You want this to look like an overreaction. That means you're doing it right. 43% of small businesses will fall, yet Wall Street gets $1.5 trillion. Make America great again. Hey, listen, Ross, I am totally with you. Everyone, the only people who didn't get screwed in this are the people who didn't need help anyway. It's absolutely true. Yana writes, found you 4 weeks ago. Thank you. You helped me so much to get ready. Of course. I'm very glad to do that. And thank you. I hope all is well. If you're the same lady who's been here, I hope things are good down there in Houston. I was reading about you. Andrew McDonald, China realizes what a paper tiger the U.S. is. I mean, all you have to do is fly out 2 planes into the World Trade Center and you shut down the U.S. for a week. The U.S. is not resilient. Well, the thing China is good at is China's good at understanding the deep play. They're a subtle society. They're a subtle culture, brilliant culture. I mean, China's been around for 6,000 years, right? So they've been there. They've seen that. You mentioned it. They've seen it. They're like that stupid farmers commercial. And they know how to play the game. And America thinks, we're a new country, right? We're an empire, really. And empires have a tendency to think force is the solution to everything. And we've got in the habit of being hammers to nails, and we don't know what to do when we're caught in a net. And that's one of the things that we have to do differently. And we'll see what happens out of it. Who knows? But I think the United States is in trouble. I think we do need extraordinary leadership to get out of this. And that if we are put in a position where we are allowed to consume ourselves, we very well may. And that makes me sad in a lot of ways. I wanted to see, America try to hold together. But I don't know. It's going to depend how well Washington can do certain things. And I don't have a lot of confidence in them. And I will tell you, if states and regions get in the habit of doing things on their own, we may end up just being friendly dissociated. That's what happened to Rome at the end. Before they were France and Italy and Spain and all those countries, they were the Roman Empire, and they ended up going their different ways. And, you look at this, the New England, the Mid-Atlantic, the Old Confederacy, the Upper Midwest, Great Plains, Texas, California, the Pacific Northwest, there are these fault lines in the U.S. that could break up in certain ways, and we'll see if it happens. I will tell you this: I worry about that, and I said this publicly, so it'll get me in trouble, but I don't care. I mean, I'm up here in Maine, and up between Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, we have, I think, between us all, maybe 1,000 cases, not even, and yet we have Massachusetts with 9,000 cases below us. New York pushing, what are they at, like 100,000 now? I forget what the number is. 102,863. We have Quebec above us that's up over 6,000 cases, and we're sitting here. No one's going to want to drive through those states. No one's going to bring us anything. We're going to be eating salmon and lobster and deer and moose up here, and eventually we're going to be on our own, and people are going to come up to us because there's nowhere else to go. What are we going to do? Do you think Washington's worried about what's happening in Piscataquis County, Maine? I don't. Or what's happening in Burlington, Vermont, or Keene, New Hampshire. I know where some of you guys are from. These things, they're not worried about it. And so we're going to have to kind of go our own way. And especially for rural states who've been thinking that way, you get out of the habit of not dealing with Washington's BS. You might start to like it after a while. Like I was saying to our friends over there in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, I was thinking about that too, because borders eventually might not mean what they mean now. If you need to get supplies, you trade with the people around you. Or we could trade with Les Québécois. I would love my friend Sebastian to bring me some poutine down here. Something like that. And these sort of things are going to happen. Who are your neighbors? Texans are going to trust Oklahomans. People in Virginia are going to work with people in Maryland. Californians might work with Nevadans. And ultimately, if DC does things that don't benefit any of us and say you have to go along with it, it's going to be a problem, because since the problem with bad policy is bad policy begets bad policy. You make mistakes at the beginning, you're left with bad choices. And Washington's bad choice is this: people don't believe this is a crisis because Washington undersold it. So a whole bunch of people are going to underreact, and now you're going to have to do draconian punishments. So the same people who are hearing Trump say this wasn't a big deal are now being threatened to have ankle bracelets if they go out, and they're going to freak out because you've created an expectations gap. You do this all the time. Or you say, we're going to help people, and then you don't give them money. Expectations gap. And that expectations gap that they at the beginning, they're saying, hey, we're fearmongers, we're causing panic. No, we were hard-eyed realists who said, people like myself, Chris Martinson, Paul Cottrell, John Campbell, all these men that were out there, we were telling you the truth as best we saw it because we knew you'd have to handle it. And we didn't think it'd be easy. It's not happy. I mean, look, I had days I cried, I got drunk, I did things that were degenerate. I'm not proud of them, and a lot of praying, which I am prouder of, because these were things. I mean, how do you stare into the eyes of a pandemic you knew was going to kill millions of people before it was done and say, okay, well, I'm fine with this? You don't. And you're watching people, and I will tell you, it was painful. It was anguishing. I'm sitting here watching this in late January, early February. I'm like, my God, they're not really going to just walk into this. And I was like, okay, maybe they just need ideas. Maybe they need a little coaxing, put some good ideas out there, and maybe they'll stop. And people with a lot more credibility than me were saying some of the same things. I just reached out to certain audiences with skills I had developed being an interesting person. I am the most interesting man on the couch. Anyway, but this was part of what I saw coming into this, and I wanted to try to prevent it, and I wanted to try to help people, and I just didn't know how to do it. So I knew I could help individuals because I know collectively, look, I was the bad guy. I get it. I was out there saying that, oh, I believe certain things that you weren't allowed to believe. But because of that, I've been willing for a long time. I just say what I think it to be true. That's all I do. And that's what I've wanted to do with this. But ultimately, government doesn't exist in that. Government exists in a weird world of satisfying different interests and trying to find a middle ground. What it does is it takes 5 wonderful meals and combines them into slop so that no one can complain because everyone's unhappy to just the right extent. And that's what pluralism is. And that's why we've had a lot of problems in the West. But it is really true you have these issues. So Becca asks, what do I think is going to happen in developing nations? The upside to developing nations is that a lot of people who are epidemiologically vulnerable are already dead. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying that because there's a lot of high-risk people we have that survive because of medical interventions they don't. The downside is their medical systems are broken. It looks like the virus is going to run hot, especially in Latin America right now and in Southeast Asia. So I would say of the countries I'm keeping an eye on in the short term, you need countries with a little bit of surveillance. Turkey is one that's going to be a problem. Brazil is going to be a problem. I saw in India today, I mean, this was disgusting, but it was trending earlier, Corona Jihad. There were these Pakistanis that were sick with coronavirus or tried to get it, and they were coughing on all these things trying to get Indians sick. I'm sure that won't make that situation worse. There'll be like 6,000 of them running around Delhi. And you see these sorts of behaviors. It's just so crazy what happens. I know Egypt has a lot of problems, but who knows? I mean, the problem with this pandemic is a lot of people don't know when it's happening. In Ecuador, they have tons of people dead on the streets that they're putting there. No one wants to pick them up. No one knows what they're there for, although everyone suspects it's coronavirus, and that's what's happening in Guayaquil. So do I think it's going to be bad in developing nations? I do. And I think what will happen is the virus has shown an ability to adapt to different environments. I think as it becomes more aggressive and more suited to tropical or other environments, we're going to see that death toll start to spike in a lot of places. Nigeria might have a problem. South Africa is another country I think has to be very wary of that. So, and when that happens, what's going to happen is there's not going to be the usual money to support them. So you're going to see a lot of human migration upwards and northwards toward the developing countries. And it will be interesting to see how different the response is this time. Historically, Europe and the United States have been very lax. I think that's going to change. MD, good to see you. Let's see, Throttle Grim. The U.S.-Australia alliance will be tested. China's bought much influence here. So if I was making a prediction, in fact, I will make a prediction, that at least in the short term, look for the alliance lines to look like this. I think the U.S. will hang strong with the Anglosphere. That's Canada, the U.K., Australia, and New Zealand because of the island thing and because the U.S. Navy is a pretty fearsome beast. Japan will be part of that. India will be part of that. And I think that is pretty much it. Ireland, maybe. I don't know. I think that's kind of the core of that coalition. China will be on a side. You will see them work with countries like Pakistan, with India, actually not with India, with Iran, I think. And I think the interesting thing is Russia and Turkey might come. And if those start to come, look for the Europeans to defect, especially the Germans and the French. And it's long and complicated, but think of it this way. The EU is sort of a petty authoritarian tyranny that doesn't like their people anyway. China's offering a lot of support to them. They hate Trump. NATO has kind of been for them. And with the UK going into Brexit, they're going to look for a way to survive. They might shed some of their periphery. So you might actually see countries like Italy and Spain get separated, but that northern plain of Europe, minus the Slavic countries stuck between Germany and Russia, is going to potentially go into that camp. If I had to guess what would happen. And that's a big guess. It's a very big guess. But what would essentially mean is you would have basically the Navy countries versus the Army countries on one hand, and it would probably end up pushing the U.S. out of the Middle East, which would be pretty bad for the Arabs. But honestly, I think most Americans are sort of tired of it, and it would be interesting to see how that all plays out. So I think that is one of the things I do expect. And honestly, you know, one of the things that upset me about us not giving masks to Canada or taking them away from is I think the U.S. and Canada should be much closer together. Frankly, I think we should have been one country a long time ago, and I've written about that many, many times. But whether we are or not, it's something I actually used to advocate for when I was doing my sort of New England separatism days, that I'd love to be. I put it this way: I feel much more home in New Brunswick, Canada, than New Brunswick, New Jersey. All right. Let's see what else we got. Banks, government, and industry appear to be merging into a fascist state. Do I think they will succeed? My opinion is that the banks are making a play to control everything during this crisis, but they're doing it at the risk of putting the whole society together. It's almost neo-feudal, right? Because the Treasury is allowing the banks to buy whatever they want to buy. And what are they buying? They're buying all the stocks. They're buying all the bonds. They'll own the government. Essentially, they'll own a commanding share of the treasuries. They'll own a lot of the commodities. They'll own a lot of the mortgages. They're allowed to buy asset securities through this company called BlackRock. They'll be able to buy all of the they already own a lot of the gold, frankly. The Fed began collateralizing that a long time ago. And then they'll own the blue chip stocks. So fundamentally, these people will own everything. So if we go back to the old world, all we're going to be doing is working to pay for interest. And so when you own all that, government and industry will come alongside. So do I think it's a fascist state? I wouldn't use the word fascist. I would say it's sort of like some form of syncretism where you have a financial oligopoly, you know, something like, it's like the Iron Bank of Bravos, really. It's really kind of disgusting. And the question is, are we going to let it happen? And, you know, there's going to be a push against it. There's definitely going to be a push from the sort of like leftist, socialist, communist way of thinking about it. But will there be other pushes? Will there be regional pushes? Will it even hold together at all? I mean, if the dollar begins to break, what good does the bank do to have all this denominated debt? I know some people, the Q faction out there, thinks that this is the way the state is going to be able to take back power from the banks. I'd love for them to be right, but I'm still waiting for Jeff Sessions to do the things they promised. So, not a big believer in that. I do believe, however, regional areas are going to look for separation, and I think I've always said, look, and I've been in politics a long time. If I could do one thing in politics in the world, I'd kill the bank. I'd absolutely kill the bank because, I mean, think of how much of your life goes just paying for interest. You know, the federal government actually pays interest to print their dollar bills. I'm not even making this up. And you guys have been here. How many times has my podcast been shut down when I start teaching you guys about the Federal Reserve? It's not a good thing. It's not a good institution. And frankly, debt as a general instrument is not good. It's just a means of conveying human servitude over generations. Let's erase the debt. I mean, why not? Is there anyone here who would be so upset with having debts erased? I understand contracts and whatnot, but look, this is an act of God. Acts of God are built into actuarial contracts. And whether some idiot did it or otherwise, realistically, we're resetting our whole society. I think everyone has been known for a long time we need a fresh start, and I support that. So we'll see if it happens. Okay, so let's see. Christy Coleman, Tom, does the government know that we are all susceptible equally, even the elderly? Or excuse me, even the healthy? I don't think they'd shut down the economy, protect elderly and unhealthy. Do they know something truly scary? I think the government doesn't know what it doesn't know, but I do think that they are starting to have an understanding that a whole bunch of people they didn't expect were getting sick. Some of the younger people were getting sick. Longer-term infection rates that were happening. We've seen neurological symptoms, immunosuppressives. So does the government know? I don't have a lot of faith in the government knowing anything, but I think it's a reasonable thing to be very careful in the suppositions you make. And I would say with younger people, them being super spreaders because they get around a lot more, definitely should limit sort of things. But we should absolutely be aware and understand that some very healthy people do get sick. It seems to me more than anything, it's a crapshoot depending on how your immune response works and how timely it is. All right, let's see what we got here. It looks like some people deleted some things. Oh, man, you guys asked a lot of questions, but that's fine. I'm here. Let me put my glasses on for a minute here just so I can take a look here and take a drink of my beer. I will answer them all. I promise, though. I absolutely do. You know, what happens when you get to the bottom of the chat, if you've never done this, you got to scroll down and you see it, but then you don't know what's happening here. So, thank you that it should be the #1 show. I absolutely appreciate that. Very, very good. Appreciate that. And hopefully it is. I mean, it's the best information on the internet. I mean, I'm one of those weird freaks who just knows everything, and I don't know why. My mind just works that way. Let's see. I saw the Yahoo. Good to see you, Bear. Glad you are here. I saw the Yahoo News article that said the CDC suggests all Americans should wear masks. Absolutely. Let's see. Moontree writes, why do you think the outlook is so bad when we went through the Spanish flu with 50 million deaths and society continued to march forward? There's a very easy question for that. When we were dealing with the Spanish flu, people primarily lived on farms still and homesteads. So what ended up happening is people were only one step removed from living a very simple life. So even city folk had largely grown up in rural environments. So 90% of people knew how to grow food. 90% of the food was decentralized. Things came in from communities. The reason why it's so much worse now is because we live in specialized environments where we are dependent on other people to meet our basic needs. And that dependency is the heart of the story. The virus in and of itself wouldn't be that hard. Imagine you all lived on a homestead and you could just go home and stay home and grow your farm and not see other people. It really wouldn't be that much different than usual, except you wouldn't be able to go get stuff all the time. Unfortunately, now we live in a society where 90% of the people have to interact with one another to survive in this surrogate world that's run by money rather than being close to the land, that's heavily urbanized and whatnot. There were advantages to that world in the fact that specialization created certain opportunities, but it also created this dependency where the reality is now we have a position where many people won't be able to survive if they need to rely on basic skills. That's why I think it's so bad. And what are the consequences of that? Obviously, we're going to have people who have a much more generalized skill set, so we don't get in this position again for a couple hundred years. And this is human society. We get into a plague, people go back to the land, eventually people get better, they get confidence. Kids grow up who hear these stories about the crazy Americans that disappeared because they had some plague. Oh, that's a load of crap. That's never going to happen to us and repeat. This is why they say history repeats itself. It really does, because what happens is events that taught people certain lessons pass out of institutional memory, and there are different things that happen over time. So hopefully that answers your question. That's my take on it as a historian. Let's see here. I'm glad someone took your offer seriously for the masks over there, Asian Cowboy. Hey, good to see you, BR. Glad you're here. Walmart introduced enforced social distancing Let's see. Walmart introduced enforced social distancing policy that only has dozens of people loaded into a store at a time. They have capability to go full pickup only. Feeling is you're being slow walked into a new normal, Omegas. Yeah, I mean, the new world is going to be for a while much more separated. That's the nature of the virus, and a lot of people feel uncomfortable about that. I am one of them. But the reality of the virus doesn't care about what we want, and the truth is, we have to decide not to let it destroy the things we care about, and that puts much more of an onus on each of us. So let's see what happens here. Let's see. Thank you guys for taking care of that thing with Johan. By the way, I appreciate that. I don't know why he Spotify canceled me. There's nothing else I can do here. Let's see. KCS. My thought on DoorDash and other food delivery services. ETA on shutdown. I'll give you the ETA on shutdown. I think we're going to be shut down through at least June, maybe July, in most places. And I don't know if it's going to hold together through that. And if it doesn't, then this burns hot. And I do think there's going to be a second wave because I think there'll be a mutation or something else will happen. I don't have any specific reason to think that. Just seems like that sort of year. But DoorDash and other food delivery services, I mean, it depends where you are. If you're in a low-density area, it's a little less risky, but trusting a driver is a little bit tricky. I don't know. I don't feel confident about it. I like to go get my own stuff, but ultimately, it's probably safer a little bit than going out to have to get the things. If you can cook from home, I'd recommend to do that, honestly. But I get why people don't. It's probably safe. Depending on what food you get, you probably just want to be really careful about how you handle it, but it's not great. Okay. Not about. Hey, Tom and Dana, I agree with a lot of the geopolitical fallout you predict. However, I think you overestimate the demand for U.S. food and the number of U.S. allies. Love the show. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, they are projections. They could be wrong. The U.S., there's a lot of countries. In the end, I think the U.S. can probably count on the Anglosphere and Japan. That's about it. Everyone else, I think, would probably screw us. And I don't really expect more than that. Now, in terms of the demand for food, I mean, the U.S. can take care of itself. And look, if we go back to being a country that's self-sufficient, I mean, the truth is, the U.S. is blessed by geography to be on its own continent, and especially if we work with the Canadians. We don't need anyone else, and that's going to be a good thing to be under because in the short time, we really can't do things with anyone else anyways. So maybe those are the conversations we need to be having. If I was your president, I would be having those conversations right now about Fortress North America, our island friends we work with, and shutting down everything in those countries and building our own trade networks to meet our basic needs. And that's something I would have done even before the virus, but the virus makes it all even more successful. So, yeah, I think it's a question. And, look, I make certain speculations to make this a little more fun for you guys. But I do think the demand for U.S. food actually is real. And let me make the argument why. China gets a lot of its food from East Africa. East Africa is getting torn up by locusts. Russia is shutting out their external weed surveys. So whatever food comes out of America is going to be in very high demand. And there's a lot of places around the world that will not have the ability to produce. We'll see what happens, but I think food is going to matter. But unfortunately, we are not probably going to be able to produce it because we've been using migrant labor for way too long. And I think one of the things that will change massively in the future is America will no longer have monocultures throughout the Midwest. For instance, I think there's like 4 different subsidies and like 10 forms of insurance for corn, including ethanol. I think you're going to go back to smaller farms, less of the big things that are out there. Family farms that have diversified agriculture, including different types of food that can be fed rather than one giant farm that has corn. And while it won't be as efficient, it will be much more redundant. And I think the new word, if sustainability was the word of the teens, redundancy will be the word of the 20s. Because when you have things fall out on you, people will get in the habit, like people who lived through the Depression did, of having 2, 3, 4 of something. Like, I'll give you an example. So I was cooking the other day, and my can opener was kind of a little wonky, and I'm thinking, oh, hell, I only have one can opener. I have literally like a ton of canned foods, and what good does it do me if I can't open any of it? So I took care of that dependency. Those little things like that are going to happen, and that's what you're going to want to do. Things you have on hand you can use and you can need. Asian writes, I've experienced the ridicule and fear of being vocal, but real leaders blaze trails. Look, I have stared down the New York Times before, and I told them to go screw themselves. I got to tell you, I loved it. It was great. I got all dressed up to look terrifying. This happened to me a few years ago, the day I got fired from my job. And some of you know I got fired because I made some statements that were a little controversial. I'm not asking you to endorse what I believe, okay, or what I said. But what I am telling you is sometimes you just got to stand where you stand. And look, it feels good to be honest. Just be true. And that's what you got. You don't have time anymore to be lying. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to others. Just say the truth. Say what you believe. And if people say, look, and if someone disagrees with you and you think they're wrong, say, hey, look, I think you're an idiot, but let's get past that. And that's what we used to do. I don't know why we can't do that. People could get along. You would be surprised at the people who get along. The reason we don't get along is because we've allowed referees to come between us for years and say, oh, well, you can't think that. You're not. Look, think what's true. Seek it out. If people tell you to do things, one way or another, if it doesn't make sense, don't follow them. That's all. And look, yeah, I'm a leader. I've paid a high price for it, but I've learned how to do it. That's what being a man is all about, And people don't know how to do that. We don't. I mean, let me make another prediction. Masculinity is coming back. Women are not going to be looking for the sensitive type. They're going to be looking for guys who are real pains and who can protect them. And I'm just saying that is reality. Look, biology has realities. I don't necessarily like them either, to be very clear with you. But these things exist, and we're going to have to live in that world. One of the realities of biology is that a virus wants to eat us all up for food. We start with that, and we build around ways to protect ourselves from the consequences of that. So let's see. Great description by Fero Blonde. Hydroxychloroquine works. It allows the zinc into the cell to destroy the virus RNA. Absolutely awesome. We were going to buy hens, but at this point, everything's getting infected. Go ahead and get the hens. It's worth the risk. Unless it's like really terrible, get the hens. We're going to do the same things. Let's see. Christy writes, Tom, I've already noticed my Amazon deliveries will be late. Amazon continues to service Italy. Do you think they will stop here or severely limit? They're running about a week out, and they have sickness in 4 of their warehouses that I'm aware of. They may at some point begin shutting down. If things get really, I'll tell you what happens if things get really bad in New York. The Staten Island warehouse where they treat those Amazon workers like crap gets raided by the employees, including the managers. That's what happens if things get really bad. So if Amazon begins shutting down, or you see distribution warehouse getting looting, because this is what happens. You take a pallet off the truck and one of the pallets doesn't make it. That sort of scales of corruption happens all the time. But those sorts of things becoming much more common is something to keep an eye for. Right now, we're not there because people think we're going to get through this. But if we're sitting there 4 weeks from now, the government's saying that we're going to extend this another 6 to 8 weeks, and that food is starting to look a little scant. People still haven't gotten their money, or worse still, they've gotten money, they can't afford it, and there isn't anything on the shelves. That's a problem. Revolutions happen for 2 reasons. People feel the world isn't fair to them, and people start going hungry. Watch for those things. For the moment, Amazon is holding up, but there are problems. We'll keep an eye on it, and I'll be on top of that. Believe me, I watch that like a hawk. It's the first thing I look for every day, because when that problem happens, I'll be ringing the bell and warning you. I'll be doing more than that, actually, but I will definitely be telling you at least that much. Masks are definitely good. That's good. Eki, good to see you. I hope you're well out there. Glad to see you, my buddy out there. Hutchins says, I use my personality to self-isolate. I'll tell you a story. I shouldn't tell you a story. There's a guy in town. We'll call him Wade. That's not his real name. It doesn't matter. But some people came into town from out of state, and he just basically eyeballed them. He sat out there. He painted on spray paint on the snow, go home. And the guy was like, they went to him, the people who came in, they were from out of town. They go to this guy, and they said, we're going to call the cops on you. And he goes to them, you should mess with me. I'm unstable. And if a guy says to you that he's unstable, and this guy's going around, this big, burly, lumberjack-looking dude, just scared the hell out of him. Those people left town the same day, and I shouldn't laugh about it. It's a terrible story. But it's a funny story because, first off, if someone tells you they're unstable, I give them the benefit of the doubt. And this is like the reality of small-town living, that if people don't know you, they're not going to trust you. So why do I tell you that story? That ultimately you need to have people you know and people you trust. And now's not a time to be building a much bigger trust circle. Your trust circle is going to have to exist of people around you who you can actually talk to. And that's why you should make nice with your family, the people around you, the people who know you. And if you were going to bug out from somewhere, man, look, that window closed 2 weeks ago, unless you're in a really terrible position. And if you go somewhere, you better be real scarce unless you got friends or family that will keep you safe. I went on a walk today, actually, around my neighborhood. And, I was out by myself, nice and safe. And I only saw one out-of-state plate. It was New Jersey, and it was hiding deep in the woods where they wanted to make clear they weren't there. And I understand that. Look, people are family. I get that. I'm not attacking them, and I'm not necessarily endorsing this guy. But, it did work as a deterrent, so who knows? It's going to end up being that way. It's just that. But I'm glad to see you here, Eki. I meant to call you. I'll have to call you soon, so we'll definitely do that. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through. So let's see. On the other side, artificial, natural. So it looks like you guys are thinking about 80-20 that it's artificial. We have 2 people thinking it's natural here. And I'm interested to see who is actually saying which, because I know some of you guys. So, all right, so a lot of people think this is artificial. Some of you think it's not. And look, it could be natural. It would be a hell of a thing, but it could be. But if it is natural, I think it's something that kind of got taken somewhere because it doesn't really make sense where it launched. And hey to everyone who's here, by the way. Thank you for commenting here. Angie says, talked to my daughter today, super pissed about the Captain Crozier on the Roosevelt. When they fire over protecting human assets is scary. That is true, and none of that should have gone political, but yeah, it is kind of sad that what happened with that. I agree with you. Oh, let's see. Natural for artificial editing. Nature is more diverse. Maybe. Let's see. Sebastian, Tom, Collective Knowledge Base. Can you point people to our research channel? Absolutely. I am very happy to do that. So on the Telegram network, I'm going to share with you a couple links. This is Coronavirus Central. This is on Telegram. If you're on Telegram, you can meet people. It's kind of a pain, but whatever. We have a lot of chats in there. And then there is a research group. It's called CVC Research. And it's not for a bunch of questions, but if you're a medical researcher, we have some really smart people who are working in field and they're finding some of this data. Look, it's not just me reading lab papers all day. I get to cheat now. I've brought people around who help. We really do have an open source intelligence network. Sebastian's one of the moderators there. Seaver actually did some work as well. A couple of you are familiar from there. It does a really good job with it. Get a lot of information out to the people, and I'm very blessed and grateful that they help me out and make it easier. I help a little bit too, and I try to ask pointed questions sometimes, but mostly I just kind of complain about things I don't like at this point and try to help people who I can, because I mean, the podcast beats the crap out of me. It really does. But that's okay. We're gonna have at least one more really good week before we hit Easter, and then I might have to take a couple days off for planting season. And that used to happen back in the day. We would have to do it because I have to help the wife out there, and I got to feed myself so I can keep you guys going. But I'll come in here in the evening and keep you guys company, let you know what's going on out there. So let's see what's happening. So you guys seem to think 85-90% it's artificial. So I think that's interesting here. Let's see. I can't stay. I let you direct the people. Bye. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. I appreciate that. Did I hear about dairy farmers being asked to dump milk this week? Why? You can freeze milk or just defrost it in the refrigerator. So this is a story from Berks County, Pennsylvania, which is the Philadelphia suburbs. I've seen this story. There's another one I've seen in with, I think it was oranges in Florida. A lot of places where, the distributors are not picking up the goods because they don't have the ability to package them. And a lot of goods that will be food that we very much would want, including dairy and perishable goods, are not being picked up. One of the big things I haven't talked about enough, Ice Age Farmer did a good job covering some of it, is these in-between packaging entities that are not necessarily being able to handle the volume of flows because they've lost people, because people aren't going to distribution warehouses. A lot of the jobs involved in agriculture involve people at the fringes of society and pay very poorly, so a lot of people are now just going ahead and not participating in them because they're high risk, they're high density in terms of the people, and they don't want to be there. So that's something to keep a very close eye on. It is very sad, though, that I saw all that milk being wasted, because it's a lot of effort and a lot of food for a lot of people. So let's see. Link to an article with Tom. If you get Venmo, I'll donate to your cause. Appreciate the info you're providing, but don't want to mail anything. I do have a Venmo now. I will share it with you, Moontree. But I'll tell you what, pretty soon I should be able to have super chats in here. And I'm working at that. I've now reached the level where I can do that, so you guys can help out. And I understand that, and we will put that in there. And Dana, if Dana wants to put in a Venmo link for anyone who wants to support us, we can do that maybe. So we'll take a look at that. Keep up the great work. Thank you, and thank you for Dana for sharing that. Good to see you, Andrew. Glad you're here. Great job, Tom. Keep an eye on Russia. Take advantage of the situation. Look, everyone's going to take advantage of the situation, and you need to be one of that everyone, because ultimately that's how you stay safe. Be smart, be ahead of it, and don't do what other people are doing when they're doing it. Do not be part of the herd. You roam by yourself. If you need me to help you, that's okay. Let's see here. Do I think my ideas might be challenged or affirmed in the aftermath? Yeah, I hope they're challenged. Look, will they be challenged or affirmed? Well, you have to ask the question more specifically, right? Because I don't actually know what idea you're talking about, but every idea is going to be challenged now, and we'll see. And we're going to keep trying things until we find something that works. The reason why people are listening to me as a dissident is because I predicted how this was going to go wrong, because I had dissident ideas about the way things function. And part of that is that I view society through the context of culture and people and patronage networks as opposed to economics, finance, and state relationships. I can talk in those terms, and I do on the show, but fundamentally I think who people are motivates what they do much more so than I think some of these other mode of interests. So, and that's something I think of, and I do think that ultimately we will see people learn from trauma. We are scarred by certain experiences, and the experience of all the panic, anxiety that people are feeling, people are going to do things differently in the future. Even if life goes back to normal, I'll bet everyone in the States will have a much bigger supply of toilet paper in every one of their pantries. You know why? Because when things get crappy, you want to be able to wipe, not swipe. God, I make terrible jokes. I don't know how my wife puts up with me. Unpredictable, yes. What if it started as an engineered plan to get a virus from a Canadian lab to Wuhan? So I've heard this story Andrew's sharing with me, and yeah, I mean, ultimately there are theories that there are deep intelligence games here, and there's a really weird story with Charles Lieber and a lab in Manitoba, and these people in Canada, and we looked at it in January, and my answer is I don't know. I mean, maybe. I know deep state stuff do funny things. I've met some people of them. Hell, I even got some people floating around our group. I wonder if they're not out there. So we're going to see what happens. But yeah, absolutely, it could be possible. And look, Chinese believe that the CIA did this to them. Maybe. I don't think that's true. Only because my understanding of the CIA is they like to have controlled chaos, and this is not controlled chaos at all. It doesn't really fit their MO. There are non-state actors that would do things like this, but it doesn't really fit how the West likes to do things. Like the Hong Kong protests, that looked like CIA to me. But this other stuff, not so much. Just my read, I could be wrong. People do evolve, and what better way to trick someone than to do things offsides? So do I mean Athens won't be loyal to Sparta? Man, Athens was never loyal to anyone, not even itself. Ask Socrates about that. You could if before he swallowed the hemlock. Seaver, should I try to pay off my debt or save my money? Man, that's a hard question. I don't. I will tell you what I did. I decided that I was willing to run up debts because I thought the ability to collect debts would go away. And that I decided it was more important to have enough supply of fixed goods that make me survive a longer time. I made that decision. I basically bet against society surviving this as is. Was that right? Was that wrong? I don't know. But I figured I could more easily get money than I could get more goods. So I'm not saying to sell the farm, so to say, but what I am saying is that ultimately having things you can use versus titular mortgages, debts like that. I mean, ultimately you own what you possess at the end of this. And for debts to have meaning, for contracts to have meaning, the state has to have the functional ability to come collect, right? And even if the state has a lot of weapons, let's say, if the state has 10 guards, they represent 10 landowners against 1,000 tenants who are pissed off, what is the possibility of them enforcing this? And the same thing exists with landowners. I suspect at the other side of this, it's going to be very hard to enforce contracts for quite a while, and the very decision to do so may be destabilizing to civilization. So what happens with that is one of the questions that I ask about. But if you are in a position and you have the means to do these things, what I would say is, pay your mortgage if you have your pit mortgage, or if it is a forbearance, take the forbearance. But I wouldn't go invest anything more into ownership of something that you need unless it gives you physical control of an asset that you don't already have in hand. When it comes to stocks or something, even like gold contracts, I know people buying gold and silver. I'm not sure they're ever going to get fulfilled. If you don't know about it, there's something called force majeure, and it works like this. That a lot of time, or not a lot of times, in certain extreme situations, an act happens where a contract cannot be fulfilled. We are in a position like that. So I think that's really important to wonder about. So let's see. Asian asks, does it matter what his background is if the material he provides is legitimate? Today is the beginning of a new age, and people's true character will come to the surface. And look, I've talked about this before, just so you know, my background. What I did, I was in a town of 98% of people that fit a certain origin. I was asked to attack those people. You tell me, if you were me, would you do that? I didn't. And I was asked to go out there and say, hey, I believe in a set of beliefs that are the antithesis of what I believe. And I couldn't do it. I'm not that guy. I mean, look, if you want someone who's going to blow, smoke up your rear end and tell you that it's something special, go talk to someone else. I went to the middle of the woods. Look, I was in a town of 700 people where I was literally, I'm not even kidding, 60 miles from the nearest stoplight. The nearest stoplight was in Saint-Georges, Quebec. This was literally where I was living. And they asked me, what do I think? I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you what I think. And I still to this day, I mean, people say, Tom, do you recant what you said? No, I don't recant what I said, but I never said I don't like people. I don't hate people. I don't get along with people. I'm a nice guy. I genuinely am. But I'm just going to stand up for people. And I stand up for myself. I stand up for people like me. And I stand up for people who work with me, including every single person who listens to my podcast. The people who listen to me know that. And if I disagree with you, I will tell you I disagree with you. Would you rather have someone who says, okay, well, it's just fine, or someone who cares enough to actually disagree with you and try to change your habits? That's the type of guy I am. That's what I do, and that's why I'm a leader. People trust me. I'm both the most loved and hated person in the state of Maine, and I'll tell you why. Because I go out there and I pick the fights that people can't pick for themselves, and I do it to protect them from things. I protect people. I'm like a rock. People stand behind me. And look, sometimes do I have rocks in my head? Maybe. I mean, my wife tells me I have a big egg-shaped head. That's true. But I do these things because they need to be done, and someone needed to say the truth. The government wasn't doing this. They weren't doing this. The CDC wasn't doing it. And people aren't telling you, look, America may not make this. And if it does, you need strong people who can lead. I'm one of those people, and I hope and pray every one of you are. Whether you're a man, woman, whether you're Christian, Muslim, white, black, it doesn't matter. American, Canadian, Australian, I don't care. You guys have to be the leaders, and I'm teaching you how to do it. And if I know how to do it a little bit better, it's because I've paid the price. And look, I did pay a high price. I lost my friends. I was a pariah. No one cared. People shunned me. But ultimately, I learned how to be an individual. And you know what? I'm grateful for it. I always think of it, as a Christian, I think of it this way. Suffering teaches us something. When people have things go well, they don't learn a damn thing. They act like idiots. Every one of us is learning from this experience. And that's the one thing I'm a little grateful for with the coronavirus, that we are learning how to be better people because we have to be. Because a lot of us were crappy before, myself included in some ways, and I didn't like it. I mean, people will never tell you the story of all the times I offered to have conversations with people, or all the times I offered to tell my side of the story and never got to. You never hear it. You read a story about someone out there. You read the media tell you something, and you say, okay, that's it. Let me tell you something. Don't believe everything you read. The world is more complex than you think, and that doesn't mean that there are times no one is always the good guy. No one is always the bad guy. There's just people for situations, and in that way, society is very smart. Stonewall Jackson, one of my heroes, was a raging autist, as best we can tell, who in any other situation would seem insane, but as a general, he was brilliant. And that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes you need people like that, and you can't have too many people like me or like him. Not that I'm like him, but those sorts of people, but you need them for certain situations. So I'm sharing that with you so that you understand. You can have a little bit of my testimony. And so what did they do during this? They went out, the Daily Beast, this guy gets in touch with me. He's like, I want to talk about coronavirus. I'm like, okay. And then he basically runs a nasty hit piece on me about comments I made from 2017, where I said things. And look, yeah, I've said things before. I say all sorts of things. I have literally a track record of about 20,000 tweets between different platforms, and they find the 5 ones that people find the most offensive. I'm like, okay, so I said things. What do you want me to tell you? You're the worst person known to mankind. I mean, you want to know who the bad people are? I'll tell you who the bad people are, the politicians. Their stupidity is getting people killed. All I'm doing is sitting up here in a cabin on a Friday night drinking a beer with some friends. Who the hell am I hurting? They tell you I'm the bad guy? Look in the damn mirror. How about the media? They had the opportunity to watch all of this. What did they do? They spread the corporate line. Oh, this isn't bad. You don't need to worry about it. It's not this. The economy, they're the ones who are getting people killed. You want to know who the blood's on? The people with the 5-inch heels from Bandolino. Those are the people who have the blood on them, not me. I'm just out here helping people. And that's the reality of the world. I mean, honestly, politicians are the bad guys. I mean, a lot of them, not all of them, but most of them, they kill a lot more people than any one of us. So that's me. And you guys have got to know me. You're here. Obviously, you're sticking around. You know what? And I like to think it's not in spite of my personality. I like to believe it's a little bit because of it. Because you know what? I'm here. And if you have questions and you want to discuss things, I answer everything. I answer every one of your questions. And some of them are a little bit awkward for me, and I try to do it with humor and grace. And if I'm wrong, sometimes I've been wrong. And that's okay. 3 months of prescriptions are awesome. While the world sleeps, Ross still works. Man, you're a hard worker, though. We know that. I grew up in the OC and now in Tennessee. I like both worlds, but Tennessee is really blowing. I'm sorry to hear that. I love Tennessee. I've been to both of those places, but it's been a long time. So, yeah, and look, you can ask questions. Don't worry about it. I just want to understand your question, D-Program, about what idea you're asking specifically. I don't mind hard-hitting questions, and it's fine. By the way, never shave the beard. I'm not a beard guy. This will surprise you. The beard has become part of my personality, though. Maybe I'll get a new thing. I'll say mad and plaid, and that'll be what we have. We'll have a home guard running around in plaid uniforms. But yeah, no, I'm glad you like the beard. I got to tell you, though, I'm a lip eater. I mean, I have some teeth problems. That's no secret. So people can kind of see little things. And I didn't have money. I'm a poor guy. We didn't have money for myself to get teeth and my wife to get medicine. So my wife got medicine, and every now and then I deal with chewing on some clove. And these are the sacrifices we make, and I don't regret it. I don't feel bad about it. I'm not asking for empathy. I did those things, and I'm glad for it because my wife has chronic Lyme, and I think about one of the things I think about a lot is the people who have other conditions who aren't getting taken care of because of this. It's a difficult situation and a sad situation. It's really something that is tragic in a lot of ways, and I don't know what to say with it other than I try to help keep her alive. And for people in those situations, especially a system that didn't let us buy prescriptions, maybe in the future we won't have something that's so micromanaged where people can get 90 days of prescriptions without these disasters, so people can be safe, and that we do things domestically. I think that's really important, and it's one of the things I predict will change. Let's see. What are my thoughts of the WHO on doing a 180 on taking NSAIDs? So what? Just so update me because I wasn't aware they did this. Are they saying that it's good now? Because I thought they were saying it was bad. If they've done an update, you're ahead of me. Also, how much vitamin C are you taking daily? About 3,000 milligrams. A doctor told last week the Reardon protocol has been debunked. People change different things. Some protocols work for some people, some don't. I don't think we have a cure for anything yet. I do think we have some things that are helpful to some people, and it's worth trying something. I'm one of those people who would throw things at the wall. So you'll have to tell me that. In Indiana, Pence was governor when he had the largest HIV outbreak in the world. He had the solution, let the addicts die. There are people who think that way. I know the HIV problem in Indiana was real. There were a lot of issues, and it's highly controversial. Let's see. My Scientology neighbors are having a party on in Florida. Package. Scientology is really weird with what they believe in some things. I don't want to get into a religious judgment, but I've watched the Leah Remini show about this. The wife and I watched that, and it's very interesting what they believe. Let's say it that way. I'll be nice about it. I'm not a believer in L. Ron Hubbard's beliefs, but and I think it's kind of crazy how basically they keep people on camps and don't let them out. Generally, not a good sign. We'll leave it at that. And who knows what they're doing. A family paused on the sidewalk looking at our windows. I told my family to look through glass, paper, flowers, and butterflies. Our 2 kids and 3 waved. It's nice to have something to smile about. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to see that. That's absolutely awesome. Good to see you, Rhesus. Let's see. WHO went from warning inflammation or people not to take NSAIDs, tweeting at present, and that was based on a French study. At present, based on currently available information, they do not recommend against the use of ibuprofen. So I don't know, man. I am not a doctor. I just play one on the internet. But I would think the problem with ibuprofen is that what I am studying in COVID is that you have this situation where inflammation is happening because of an immune response, and that using ibuprofen could potentially inflame that in unpredictable ways. I would think it logical to stick to what they call paracetamol, basically Tylenol, acetaminophen, that you need to be able to use that. And I think that's safer. So even if they're not recommending against ibuprofen, I would say given the choice, it's probably safer to use Tylenol for a lot of different reasons because ibuprofen's interactions with swelling in the immune system are a little more complex. And why make things complicated? You don't want to do something fancy when simple will do. So that's my thought. Yeah, no, trolls are fine. Look, I've been trolled for years. I've had people put guns on me for political reasons. I'm not an easy dude to mess with. Unfortunately, my friends had more, and that's how that went down. But these are the things I've dealt with in my life. So I'm sort of a hard guy to scare. And it's funny because I really don't, in another world, in the world I would have imagined, I would have been the geek wearing glasses, working as a professor, telling stories about the Middle Ages, and I would have been fine with the outcome. Life is funny. It doesn't always go how you expect, and that's how it is. Let's see. What do I think about the New York governor using National Guard to seize PPE from ventilators and private companies not giving them up? I am loath to see those things happen. There are situations of extreme hoarding that I am aware of where maybe I would think of it, but I don't think the government should be punishing people for their awareness. I really don't like that. And I really don't like the fact that they're tracking everyone's cell phones. There's a lot of information. Dana was sharing this. Sebastian, who was here earlier, was actually sharing what they're doing in Quebec. I think that's going to sit very poorly with a lot of people. But I understand from the government perspective, when people don't take this virus seriously, they're put in a very bad spot. So I think that that's really difficult. And I like Andrew's answer, by the way, here. NSAIDs, that means non-steroid, what is it? Frig, I can't forget with the immune drugs. All right, we're going to look it up. See, I'm starting to get tired now, and so I'm messing things up. NSAID. Let's make sure I'm saying this right here. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. There you go. So now I said it right. I can only remember so much in one day. Non-steroidal anti. I knew it wasn't steroids. I just forget what the letters are needed here. How high is too high of a fever before you should try to keep it down? You gotta look at what the doctors say. I think it's usually if it goes above. Usually they try to start it down at 100 and don't go above 103. So we'll see what's here. Let's see. Invest in education. Over 105 organs. Google and thank you. Google and Amazon take over. Yeah, that's a problem here. I mean, I can see what Corona is saying. The government, you got to keep an eye on it. Absolutely here. Thank you to AB for being here. And I agree with Mary saying we need smart solutions. I want structure. Zone this neighborhood for this grocery store. Yeah, I mean, you need structure. But I will tell you one of the things. Don't count on the government to do it. Count on the people in your society. Talk to each other. Figure out how to do it. You don't need someone to tell you how to do things that are smart. You know, when you bring in a middleman, that's when the corruption happens. Just figure out a way to do it. And that's absolutely good. I finished a bottle of Bailey's myself. As a true doomer, my new fear is the virus is step one of a Chinese globalist elite plan to invade North America with Chinese ground troops. Good news for you. I'm pretty sure that we are not going to have an invasion of North America. What was it that was it? Isoroku Yamamoto once said it best, before Pearl Harbor. He's like, behind every blade of grass in America, there's a gun. And that was back when we didn't have as many weapons as we do now. Invading America is crazy. The Chinese strategy is never going to be to invade America. China's strategy will be to, if they decide they want to collapse America, they will do so in a way where Americans go to war with one another. And when you see the fact that we're still fighting on left-right bases, that is a real possibility. We were very close to a civil war before this happened. If someone had gotten shot at the Richmond rally in January 14th, America would be dealing with the coronavirus in the middle of a civil war. I absolutely believe that, and I was in a position to know these things. So let me just tell you, there's a lot of problems out there. This is an opportunity for us to decide what a new America looks like. And look, I think you could have an America, at least with America and Canada, and we could talk about Latin America. There's problems there. It's more complicated. But if we're willing to have a new identity, if we're willing to decentralize things and do things really differently, we could maybe do something really differently. But it starts with dealing with debts, dealing with finance, banks, and how we're set against one another, and giving everyone a fresh start. And whether that happens in a small area or a big area, I don't know. But these are some of the things to look at. But I appreciate the Baileys. I wish I had some of that right now, but I'll settle for Corona. So let's see. Christy says, I live in Santa Fe, a quiet little tourist town. I've been there, 60K. We have almost 400 cases. Anyway, states like ours don't get hit, or every state will get swamped. You might not. I mean, honestly, people are just sort of passing through there. You might be okay. Keep an eye for people coming up from Mexico. It might be a problem. Seriously, if you are here, should know how politics are a variable in all of this, but not the point any longer. Absolutely. If I hear the word unprecedented any more time, I'm going to scream. Does anyone know any other words? Let's see. Besides unprecedented, unseen, novel, right? I mean, we could come up with other words. Social distancing equals stay away from me. You just start screaming unprecedented, everyone. People think you're crazy. Looking crazy is a good way to be left alone, by the way, if you ever need a strategy and you're in public. No one wants to mess with a crazy person. You're locked in here with me. Let's see. Asian says, I fear war of China. They have all our intellectual property, manufacturing, which squash us and have no ethics. I'm Asian and can't trust China, the country, one iota. Of course, don't stereotype people. I know many sweet Chinese nationals. Now, you sound like a Japanese. I'm just kidding. No, it's fine. Look, it is true. Cultural ethics in Asia are very different, and the idea of property ownership as an individual thing is not an Asian idea. Communal ownership exists over there in a lot of ways, and there is a lot in Asian and Chinese culture in particular where they do try to steal things from one another all the time, and it's this form of gamesmanship. Think of it like you might think of this stereotype of gypsies in the West. It's not that dissimilar, and they see it as stupid that we give things away. And we do, because we expect them to play by our rules. We, in America, are obsessed with the idea of fairness. It's sort of a Western concept in general, and it doesn't really apply around the world. So keep that in mind, and I'm not saying people are bad. People are people, but cultures are real, and they do have a difference. So that's absolutely true. But Washington only cares about the belt they're talking about, and that's absolutely true. Fault lines. Who else do you think are long-term keen students of U.S. fault lines? China and Russia? I think they are. I think some are. I mean, countries that are good at that. Britain is really good at that. Israel's really good at that. Who else would I say is pretty good at that? Those are the big ones. The Saudis aren't bad. They're not great. But the Russians are good. The Chinese are good. The Japanese are pretty good, too, actually, to be honest with you. Yeah, those sort of countries. You check out the church is good. Don't underlook the Italians. The Catholic Church is actually really good. They haven't been around 2,000 years because they didn't figure some things out. But I think ultimately, in the end, you're going to have people look at the U.S. problem. And the culture of the West, it was a problem. We were divided. Now we need to either be strong or we need to separate into things that can fight against the virus. And I will tell you, when you solve fighting the virus, I think you're going to solve fighting a lot of the cultural problems. And maybe we can do that. But here's what we have to do. And I'll just tell you, you're not going to like this. The left is going to have to stop having their feelings lead all the time, and you're going to have to be willing to be mean sometimes. The right is going to have to stop being so individualistic and recognize that sometimes you got to help take care of people a little bit. If you can solve those two problems, if the left can stop trying to solve everyone long enough to just take care of themselves, and the right can stop complaining about rights long enough to actually work on problems in a pragmatic way, we can solve a lot of our problems, and we can get past it. And we have to agree on some truths. When I used to do my New Albion project, I used to have 4 truths, and I would submit they worked just as well for anything. They were real simple. Reason, that you lead with logic. Nature, the world has rules, we understand them, we follow them. Grace, that you, and I'm not meaning to flip you off, although I realize I did that, I'm sorry about that. That grace, the idea that you forgive yourself for mistakes and accept you're going to screw up and it's better to try than to fail and do nothing. And then loyalty. Be honest to your people, man. Americans have not, our government has not been loyal to us. Our people have not been loyal to each other, and we need to be. And look, and I will say this, and this is going to shock people, and I'm going to make people mad. At this point, the United States of America is the sum entity of all the people who are here, whatever their status is, whatever. Let's figure things we can agree upon, shut the borders to everyone else in the areas we can save, and then work it out. That's all we have to do. No one else comes in. Whoever's here, we deal with. Whether they're Americans, not even if they're citizens, I don't care. We'll figure it out. That is a realistic solution for a problem we're dealing with today. That's what I would recommend. But we'll see if we're willing to do that. Or if people want to go out there. And the problem is, and look, I will tell you the truth, there are people who are very well paid, including by the Chinese, to divide us against one another. When was the last time you saw the media actually help the people of the United States make this country better? Either side. If you're liberal, you like MSNBC or CNN. Republicans like Fox. Okay, how are they making our lives better? How are they making government work better? How are they making people get along better? They don't. They don't do any of these things. Or how about colleges? You go there and you learn how horrible America is and how you should hate everyone and we're unjust and we're awful. That's a load of crap. I mean, look, America has many faults, granted, but we were probably one of the most benevolent, gentlest powers you've ever seen in world history. We didn't try to conquer and kill everybody. Yeah, we did bad things. Everyone does bad things. We were not as bad. And then you have to feel a little bit better. And then you be loyalty to people and you call BS when you see BS. That's how you begin to solve the problems. If I was making a movement at this point, if I was out there actually running for something, I'd call it the new identity. We're all Americans or we're none of us are Americans. And if none of us are going to be Americans, that's fine. I'm happy to be a Mainer. I'm good with that. And we'll figure out our way up here. New England's wonderful. I love it up here. It's great. But if we don't want to do that, and if we can't do that, maybe we can't agree on things, then we separate, go our separate ways, and have different things. You know, Californians do what Californians do, and Texans do what Texans do. And, you know, the Quebecois go out there and they finally, you know, realize the victory of Montcalm all these years later. Whatever they are. But that would be better than us all fighting each other indefinitely, and we could be happier because America worked when it wasn't a one-size-all-fits solution. We agreed on a couple big things. We agreed to disagree and do things separately without having the government telling us all how to live, and we respected life and respected one another. And, you know, what was that world? We had a certain set of values. Okay, we were Christians primarily. I know not everyone here is Christian, but it worked better when everyone agreed on one thing because we didn't get along, and we were self-sufficient, and we accepted that we didn't have to agree with one another, and we didn't have to fight about our disagreements. But now we do because people go out there and they define progress in a way where you have to believe what I believe or you're a bad person. Well, I don't. Look, I'm a fossil. But you know what? You need a dinosaur right now. What can I tell you? Okay, so let's continue here. Where was I? I'm getting near the end here. And it's a good point, Asian Cowboy. You're making a really good case here. Whatever happened, so you heard me say that. Do I think people will begin to be in the back 40 again? Do I think if civics and ethics and history were taught differently, we might be responding differently to this crisis? Of course you would. We wouldn't be having this crisis if history, civics, and ethics were taught differently. Look, they started changing how history was taught a long time ago. It became about trends, and you know what? You want to look at lies about history? New York Times ran something called the 1491 Project, where even historians were calling this out, where they basically told history to tell a lie. And this goes back, you've read 1984, Brave New World. Orwell said the truth. He who controls the future controls the past. He who controls the past controls the present. History is just a lie commonly agreed upon. That's what Napoleon will tell you. I could tell you 3 different versions of history and make them sound just as authoritative. That's why you have to connect it to the reality on the ground. Absolutely the truth. Okay. Glad you guys are finding things here. I'm just going through. Do I think this will be as bad or worse than the Spanish flu? Worse. Very happy to answer this. Thank you, Valerie. I hope all is well in Alaska. You know, I almost took a job in Juneau. I try to imagine what that timeline was like. I always wanted to go visit up there. I wanted to go, you know where I wanted to go? In Alaska. Because I really like the idea of living in the middle of nowhere, because I keep getting drawn into doing useful things. But Lord knows I don't really want to. I kind of like being a hermit because, honestly, it's exhausting to me to have to explain things I think. But I used to imagine I wanted to go on, well, it's Iliamna Lake, and just be at a little lake in the middle, or big lake actually, in the middle of nowhere, and just forget everything that was happening out there. But unfortunately, not even unfortunately, the wife had a lot of medical needs, and I love living in Maine. Living in Maine's like living in the Shire. So we just use your Venmo, Dana. That's fine. Tom, you have developed a contagion that had been lacking in terms of the situation. What is it? Dark drive-by humor. Yeah, no, I have a real gallows sense. Look, my wife has a physical condition where literally she has a chance of dying every day. If you can't approach life with dark humor, you really won't survive. I'm used to that. Edgar, thanks for coming in. Glad to see you from Dallas. Having a nice corked bottle of local Quebecois beer after a busy Friday working from home. That is awesome. I hope everything is well up there in La Belle Provence. It's always good. Bonne nuit. Right, and who knows? Maybe you guys will work together if things go to crap. I always had this dream that we'd make Upper New England bilingual, and we could all speak French and English together. You know, because I love speaking French. I listen to French music in my car. It's absolutely awesome. So I'm a big Francophile. All right, I said ideas in a general sense because I think I do mean it in its most generous sense around any of those, but I guess specifically around race, community, and global politics, strategies around. So I'll tell you my thoughts on this since you asked. My opinion is that race is real, okay, and I'm just going to say that because we grew up in different environments and we have different aptitudes. For instance, if you watch basketball, you may have noticed that there are a lot of tall black dudes in there. So there are things that you grew up in different environments, you have different backgrounds. And if you look across history, what you would find is people who grew up civilizationally in areas that were of high food availability, like the subtropics are, tend to have an environment where they're pushing more towards how you plan for short-term benefit because you have a highly competitive society where you're looking for goods, as opposed to people in cold climates, like, say, my ancestors, the Slavs. They were in a very cold environment where they had small families and they had to work together through agriculture to cultivate land, and so they developed things. For instance, why do we have nasal voices? We have thinner nostrils because that made air that was cold air come in and get warmer so that we would be safer. All of these differences over time, the breeding of a natural environment on people, created divergent peoples that exist better in different environments and tend to be happier. For instance, I have a dear black friend. He's an English professor in the University of Fairmont State University, actually, down in West Virginia. You know, the one black guy in West Virginia, right? And he tells me, I like the idea of visiting you. I won't come up to Maine in the winter because I hate the cold. Why is that? Well, genetics over thousands of years maybe make it where he's not cold. Not that there aren't black people who don't like cold and white people who don't like warm areas, but we are genetically optimized over many generations to exist for different environments. That is not a crazy idea to say the rules that apply to biology for any other species apply to human beings. Does it make one group better than another? No. Does it make people more adaptive for certain environments? Maybe. Doesn't mean that we have something within us. How much of our personality is genetic? How much of our personality is environmental? I think these are fair questions, and we should ask them. And you can go ahead and ask those questions without having hatred, without having these issues. And I ask those questions. It's called human biodiversity. And for it, I was branded an awful person. Now, if I was a black guy saying I was proud to be black, I would be called, a thoughtful, progressive person. But if you're a white guy said that, you're told you're a Nazi. And the truth is, what is true for one group needs to be true for all groups. And that has always been my position. I have no problem with people who have pride in their identity, whatever it is. I think you should. If you're Asian, be proud of being Asian. If you're white, if you're Native American, you're black, whatever, every group should, because when one group feels like they don't have a place, and that's when the problems start. And in the United States context, blaming the majority for everything was literally causing a fight where what happens when you go to, let's say, I'll just give you an example because this is what I dealt with. real life experience. You go to a white kid and say to him, you went to school, you did well, but you can't get a job because you have privilege. That kid might have been growing in a suburb, never had any advantage in his life, but because of some theoretical privilege, he doesn't get fair consideration. And so all I've said from the beginning is you need fair rules for everybody. So do I believe in that? I've always believed in community, hyper-local. And as far as global politics, I think nations allow people to get along because people who have different cultures can have different things. I don't believe in one-size-fits-all solutions because I am not you, you are not me, and I don't believe in sameness. And that is what I actually do. So I am happy to explain what I've said, and there's a lot of interviews. And, the stuff that's written about me does tell you super nasty things about me based on things I didn't say, didn't do, don't believe, and aren't my beliefs. So how do I go out there? There's a saying in politics. They go out there and they say, when did you stop beating your wife? How the hell do you answer a question like that? Noted white supremacist and Nazi, So they say I'm a white separatist. So why did I say that? And I will tell you why that happened to me. I went up there and said, and look, if black people or any group of people say simply, we cannot coexist with you because you oppress us, I'm like, fine then, don't live with us, we'll live with ours, you live with yours, and we can all be happy together and be separate. Not because I demanded that, but because they do. And that was the thing. And I was just saying the logical consequences of something said to me. I'm like, if that's how it has to be, that's how it has to be. But I don't know if it has to be that way. I don't think it has to be that way. But it was that way because we had people agitating this and people took advantage of it. Now it doesn't really matter what you are. The race that I care about is the human race, and that people are stupid. And that's all I'm asking for. So those were my opinions. So if you've ever wondered what I think and why I think it, I actually make really good arguments, but you're not allowed to apply this. And I will say this. You do need to be able to apply basic biological principles to humanity. I really believe that, and if that makes you upset, that's fine. But let's face the truth. Let's study it. And if the studies say it's bullshit, fine. Let's go with that. I'm okay with that. But you're not even allowed to ask the question. What happens these days is it's settled science. Since when was science settled? The scientific method, okay, was that you test theories by seeing if it's true in every case. And when it doesn't work, it's not science anymore. It's dogma. And we deal with a situation where we have scientific dogma, just like Aldous Huxley talked about in Brave New World, where real science went away. Instead, we have a socialized science where we assert certain things and say they have to be true. Look, Descartes is interesting, but people are not tabula rasa. People have all sorts of things embedded in us that make us who we are, and it's a complex story. And all I'm saying is we need to understand the complexity and be honest about it. So thank you for that. I actually thank you for the questions. I'm very glad to answer these things, and hopefully my answers were satisfying for you, deprogram. And I'm sorry to hear, Andrew, that you have Lyme. Yeah, we've read so many books. There's so many protocols. NSAID. All right, we'll call it NSAID. So thank you. That's good. Let's see. China has 1 billion people. Maybe this is a way to keep rural people from the cities. Look, China can afford to lose people and space. They've done it before, so that's fine. So I appreciate that. Why does Bill Gates have a patent on the coronavirus? Bill Gates is not a great guy. I'll just put it that way. I'm not a big fan of this. So let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not. All right, so let's see. I'm just reading these things. If I advocate for violence, I don't think of anyone as beneath me. I don't think of people as beneath me. So I'm just looking at some of the lead comments. I appreciate Seaver's doing it, but I'll answer them. And look, as far as violence goes, I have never wanted violence, but I will say one thing that happens. When you make a group, you say one group oppresses other people, you make it okay to treat them differently, it's not too long before it becomes okay to do terrible things to them. And if you look at the way certain people have been treated, keep in mind, a boogeyman's being created for a reason. It's not the way you think it is. If you really understood the story and the deep of it, you'd see that the good guys and bad guys are often reversed from what happens out there. Landon, good to see you. I think that's really great. You're here. I'm a dinosaur and a bunny. Marina, glad you're here. Very good to see you here. Reese is glad to see you here. Cooks the books. Cooks the books means that you are lying about the numbers. That's all it means. It's an old term that goes, I don't even know the origin of it. And I have an uncle-in-law who's hospitalized at a ventilator. So I'm sorry to hear that, and that is a very sad story. I will absolutely be the case to pray for him. Would you talk about defending your stuff, your farm, your food, etc., vis-a-vis the law? Look, you have the right to protect your property. I absolutely agree with that, and you may need to do so in the future. Get friends, because you know what? If there's 10 of you and 2 sheriffs, you'll win. work with your community, work with the people around you, but don't look for trouble. Honestly, do not look for trouble. And as Ross said, demonization is a step towards genocide. We do not want to have that happening. I'm just trying to let you know some of these things of the world I came from. Trust me, things are not what they appear. But we're coming to the end of the show here. I went 2 hours, 12 minutes. It was a very enjoyable evening with all of you guys. Any last second things you have here? Hopefully, I answered your questions. I tried very hard to go ahead and give you a full detailed answer of everything you asked me about, including some very difficult questions. But like I said, I am just here to help people. Honestly, that's all it is. And at some point, will things happen if people don't take responsibility for themselves where I have to protect people near me? Maybe. And we all might be put in that position. You need to be mentally prepared for that. That's absolutely true. So let's see. What happened is science was used as a weapon to justify slavery as well as misogyny. I mean, look, men and women are different. What do you want me to tell you? I mean, they just are. It doesn't mean that there aren't individual distinctions. And I don't support slavery in any form, so that's fine. Science can have an agenda and be used as a political tool, and it is. Absolutely. I don't think that that's good. We need to get past that. But we should be critical. And you know what? More importantly than being critical, deprogram, we need to have conversations with one another and be very honest with one another and not castigate people for being dissenters. Because you know what? The Athenians killed their democracy when they killed Socrates for not telling them what they want to hear. And we're doing the same thing in America. Don't kill the truth tellers. Disagree with people, but don't try to destroy. I don't try to tell people they don't look. There are people who believe things that are the total opposite of what I want. I've never tried to destroy any one of them. You have the right to be wrong, and then we only go forward when we allow people the opportunity to have those questions. So absolutely want to go out there here, and hopefully you will learn from that, and you'll ask better questions. There's a reason why I was the one who found the answers quicker, because I was willing to ask heretical questions. It's okay to be a heretic. Just don't do that to the Lord. So quick prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to offer a prayer especially for Marina's uncle and all the sick people out there who are suffering from this, all the people at risk and danger. We want them all to be safe and that they can come to safety and to find greater health and comfort. So in Jesus' name, I'll pray that very simple prayer. Thank you for all those questions. I appreciate that. And I would say one thing. Be very careful. When people start to throwing a lot of things on you that end up in whys, in systems, I don't deal with systems. I just deal with people, man. And that's okay. You don't have to believe politically correct thing. And look, I believe all sorts of things that stereotypes exist because a lot of them tend to be true, but it doesn't mean you still don't respect individuals. You have to do that, and you absolutely should give people the opportunity to surprise you for good, not just bad. God bless you guys. Have a good night. Tom Kaczynski, Coronavirus Central out. I will see you guys on Monday. Have a very good weekend. Do keep safe. Bye-bye.